we're going to call the committee of the whole meeting to order. It's Tuesday, October 17th at 7:30 p.m. The first item on the agenda is roll call.
Brown.
Here.
Rosato.
Here.
Atek.
Here.
Stark.
Here.
Chancet.
Here.
Wolf. Salvati.
Here.
O'Brien.
Here.
Callahan.
Here.
Meitzler.
Here.
Malay.
Here.
Ewer.
Here.
Saron.
Here.
McFadden.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Item 2 is items removed, added, or changed. We have nothing. Does anybody have anything?
No.
Okay. Item 3, matters from the public for items that are not on the agenda. So if anybody from the public would like to address us for an item that is not on the agenda, now would be the time. Okay. If you want to address us for an item that is on the agenda, just get my attention and we'll get you up here at the appropriate time. Item 4 rather, is Resolution 17-115-R, authorizing audit for a service contract, Peggy Colby's memo, and this comes from Alderman Atek.
Yes, okay, our agreement, 5-year agreement for audit services with Sickage has expired. We've reached the end, and it's now time to decide whether we want to continue with Sickage for the next 5 years, which is what Peggy is recommending, or seek out other bids. And I guess I'll turn this over to Peggy to explain why she's recommending we stay with Sickage at least for another 5 years.
Sure. Good evening. Just to give a little information that was in my memo, prior to having Sickage, we were with the audit firm Lauterbach and Amon for 15 years. And at that time, the city council had asked that we go out for RFP just to kind of see and make sure that their fees that they were charging us, even though we had done informal surveys, just to make sure that, you know, we had a change of audit partners in that. So we did an RFP, and Sickage was, I think, the second lowest of the group, but the most qualified. They have a lot of municipalities, and they're very good at what they do. So I would recommend that we continue with them for another 5 years.
Are there any questions? No?
I'm good with it.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve Resolution 17-115-R, authorizing the city administrator and finance director to assign an agreement for audit services?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Consent agenda?
I think so.
Okay. Item 5, which is the discussion on the general obligation bond issue. Again, this is a memo from Peggy Colby, but Alderman Atek, you want to start us out?
Sure. This is related to stormwater, and we have some stormwater. Last year, we approved increasing taxes to pay for stormwater improvements. But it looks as though if we want to complete stormwater improvements, especially in the third and
Area 3
Area
and Ward
3
1.
and Ward 1, in a timely way, Peggy is recommending that we issue some bonds to pay for this so we can do it more quickly. If we continue just paying for it with taxes, we're not going to get it done. So you want to talk about it a little bit more?
Sure. Originally, when we were laying out the plan for financing the different projects that we have, we thought we would be issuing debt for the One Washington Place project this year and issuing debt for possibly the stormwater infrastructure next year. However, with the delay in the One Washington project, we wouldn't want to issue debt for the stormwater projects this year in order to obtain the best interest rate. In order to get the bank qualified bonds, there's a cap of $10 million in tax exempt bonds that you can issue. So we would want to do that this year to maximize the lowest interest rate that we could get. And so, I don't know if you had thought about getting all of that work done at once. That's the only thing. Or if you would rather that we just pay the taxes. It would be the same level of taxes whether we issue the bonds or not. It's just that you'd have that interest expense that you would be paying because you'd be spreading it over a 20-year period. So Issuing the bonds would have no impact on any recommendation for the levy.
Mike?
Well, a couple of things, I guess. I spoke last night to this, and I'm in favor of this. My problem is we waited too long. I think it's something we need to address immediately for the residents in our town. I guess my question would be, how do we, move this along further even? I know we're only allowed to take 5 million out, and in your memo you said, we're going to use part of that, 1 million of that, towards refurbishing this building. But I think it's going to cost a lot more than just $4 million and $700,000 a year.
Absolutely. We could issue more now, but there's only so much that the staff can oversee and so much construction that can be done. So we thought that we would come back to the council maybe in 2019 or 2020 and determine at that time if you would like to do another bond issue at that time or go with the pay-as-we-go on the remaining capital.
Well, I would just recommend maybe to council that we start looking into a stormwater utility then to help start to finance some of this, because it's only going to get worse for our residents, I believe. And I know what you're saying, but I just think 2019, it's 2 years away or a year and a half away, and that's just starting the process of acquiring the bonds. And then we still have to put out RFPs and RFQs and put a shovel in the ground.
Right. Well, for the projects for Area 3 and Ward 1, the design engineering is underway. So we'll be ready right away. Gary Holm and Laura and I have met and talked about whether or not issuing debt now makes sense. We don't want to do it too soon, but if we do it by the end of the year, they'll be ready to go with construction right away next year.
And just, I guess I'll be guilty of being repetitive, but again, I understand Gary's point when Gary says, well, we're only going to go for a 10-year rain event or a 20-year rain event because it costs money to dig a little deeper. But if we're going to open up and we're going to dig to replace pipes, we're better served going deeper now because it's only going to get worse weather-wise. And so I think we should, as we're bonding out, we're worried about the taxpayer dollar, absolutely. But we do have to spend the dollar to make it a better system, to make it a better life for everyone when there's a rain event. I mean, our city suffers heavily whenever there's a heavy rain event. People have leakage, there's flooding going on. So I just think we need to spend the money and do it right the first time, and not 10 years from now say, well, let's open up the ground again in Ward 1 because we've only put in for a 20-year event and we keep getting 100-year events twice a year. So I guess that's the point I'm making to everyone on the council, to Peggy, to staff. Is it something we need to fully address? And I fully get, again, that, in the third ward we have combination sewers. I understand fully what that is. I deal with that all the time. So we need to address that primarily because that's a health issue. So we need to do it. We need to address that. But stormwater throughout our city is I think we're at a critical juncture. So my point, I hope, has been made.
Dan?
The only reason we're here tonight discussing this issue is because we didn't establish a stormwater utility, right?
No, it's not.
Well,
Even if we had a
funding, I guess.
stormwater utility, we would still want to issue debt because the cash flow that's coming in to make the debt payments is the same whether it was a stormwater utility or if it was property tax.
The money would just be in a different fund. The reason I mentioned is I thought we made a value judgment to say, when we passed that ordinance saying we are going to raise property taxes, we're going to do bonding instead of charging money through a formal utility. I thought that was the distinction that we were making.
Have we
No.
decision?
I thought we kind of kicked the can down the road and said we need to pay for this, How are we going to pay for
Right.
it? We told staff we want go bonds, and this is why we're here tonight.
I guess, the way I recall it is that the question was, how are we going to pay for stormwater? Is it going to be a property tax or a stormwater utility? And the amount of money that is generated from either one would be the same amount,
It's just the mechanism.
but then the mechanism of, are you going to use that and do a pay-as-you-go capital program and just spend that every year? Or do you want to issue bonds and get it done faster and pay it back over a 20-year period using that revenue source, in this case, property taxes, but it would not be any different if it were a stormwater utility or property taxes. And the money is going into a separate fund,
Right.
even though it's property taxes. It's being transferred there.
The reason I bring it up is to Mike's point, we have a lot of things we need to do. We have a lot of money we're going to need to spend on this. It kind of feels a little more nimble to be able to say, well, you know, maybe we need to issue more bonds. We have more projects than we need to do. We're just about to go through budget discussions anyways. If we're going to make a value judgment that we need to spend 30 million this, you know, next 5-year plan, that's a value judgment we're going to have to make.
Right. When meeting with Gary and going over the cash flow, today we were discussing, and it makes sense if we increase the size of the bond to 6 million, and so I was going to bring that up also, rather than 5 million, because that would finish Ward 1 and Area 3 completely, and allow us some breathing room for other projects, because there are other drainage projects besides the flooding projects and besides the sewer separation. There's still storm water maintenance that needs to be done.
Peggy, if we do these bonds, it
Lucy, use
doesn't,
the mic, please.
if we issue these bonds now, we can still form a stormwater utility later.
It has nothing to do with issuing
So
the
there-
bonds.
If we can move the bonds around into a utility if we end up doing that, if we need.
They would still be a GO bond regardless, and the payment source would just be coming from the stormwater utility if you decided to shift away from property taxes and use a stormwater utility.
Okay, Scott?
Based on, if we do the go bonds and get an interest, as decent an interest rate as we can, what would be the estimated debt service, you know, over those 20 years?
It's pretty low, actually.
Yeah.
You would be surprised. That's why when I was laying out the cash flow, I'm like, it only makes sense to issue the debt and spread it out over all of the users that will be using it over the life of the infrastructure. So on 5 million, the annual payment would be 340,000, and on 6 million, it'd be 410,000.
Okay. I mean, what the question is a value judgment. How important is it for us to get this done sooner than later? Which I think it's pretty important. I mean, I would be for that. I mean, you're spreading that out over, obviously.
I will speak
years.
for Gary because he wasn't able to be here tonight. He would definitely like to move forward with these projects and get them done, especially because the design engineering is being done now, and to then have to stage it over a number of years, things could change, and they may have to do some re-engineering.
Go ahead, Scott.
I just want to underscore what Mike said too. Now is the time. I know we're going through our engineering. You know, to go back to, you know, we're talking about Campana and their stormwater detention, and we want them to do it now. Same concept. We need to do it now and get ourselves prepared, and you know, for what is coming. It's going to get worse, and so why not? If we have to spend a little bit more to make sure that we can move that water efficiently, we should look at it.
Dave?
I got a few comments. It's my understanding in talking with the engineering world that the engineering world is considering and studying and evaluating changing what they consider to be a 10-year flood event, 10-year rain event. They're going to possibly change what they now consider to be what they now consider to be, say, 20-year is the new 10-year. So to go with Mike and Scott's point of let's do a little bit more now, I think more now is already here. It's just that it hasn't hit the actual books of how they calculate things yet. They're studying that, and it's my understanding that that's the direction they're going, and understandably why. We're getting these events more and more often than what had occurred when these standards were made years ago. So I think we should be looking very seriously at that. The other thing is I absolutely agree with Mike. I think we should be going ahead with this project. But what I'm concerned about is we knew 12 years ago, I think back in maybe it was longer ago than that, was it the 96 flood when we evaluated this whole thing? And we came up with the solution. And the solution at that time was going to be around $8 million. So we already got a pretty good idea that we had studies done on back then of what was necessary to take place to fix these problems, and it was roughly $8 million. So I guess my point is there's a value with size and going out for a bond. First of all, I think you're going to be, if you just dwindle these little projects here and there, it's going to cost you more money over time. The larger the project, the better pricing you're going to get, the more competition you're going to get. I personally think that, that $400 and some thousand you just mentioned, you're going to save that because you're doing a large project versus doing the smaller ones. And the other thing is I really think, and I understand what you're saying, Peggy, that there's only so much staff can oversee, but there's a lot of municipalities that when they've got a big problem like this, they hire a consulting engineer, they come in and they evaluate the whole thing, which we've really already done, and they hire a consulting engineer to oversee the project, and they go out and get a bond, and they do the whole project. I really wouldn't have a problem with doing the whole project. I just find it very ironic that I pay the same taxes as somebody down the street does. I don't have sewage backing up in my basement, but they do. And I think we should all be treated the same when it comes to utilities and public safety and things like that. So I just think that we should expend the amount of money we need to expend and fix the problem throughout the entire city. It sounds like a huge project. It is a huge project, but we've been kicking that can down the road since the 96 flood. And I think we just need to do it. Now, how that affects your bonding ability, if you go out for more than that $6 million, that's for you to tell us. But I think that's what we should do.
Well, if you give me the direction, I can price out the different level of bonds up to 10 million and bring that back, and you could make that decision at that time. If you think that we should do the full 10 million, then we can do the full 10 million.
Because if we're doing 5 at, what'd you say, it was 340,000
Right.
a year for the debt service? If it was at 10, what would that look like to us to have to justify a tax increase to pay for that? Because I think that's going to be the question we're going to have in November is, do we want to add another $300,000 to our tax bill? And what does that do to each individual tax bill or the average tax bill?
Right. Well, we do have a $300,000 tax increase budgeted for to support this debt issue
Right, but
in the
what I'm saying
budget
is
for.
if we were to just double that, what does that do to the tax bill?
Well, we do have a revenue stream of $700,000 then coming in, so it wouldn't require a much larger increase, but then you would be limited on what other projects
Right, I
you
was
could
gonna say,
do.
then you're taking away the money
Right.
that's on the normal revenue stream to handle all the small stuff.
Right.
And I don't know that we want to ignore that because there's still going to be things on.
I
Well, there
agree with you,
definitely
Alan. I
is.
don't think we want to ignore it, but I think we really ought to take a look at what it would take to fix the problem
Right.
and what that cost would be without other areas suffering because we're fixing that problem.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, is we'd have to raise taxes to pay for that debt service, so I'd like
Right,
to know.
but again, back to my point, if we raise the taxes and we're not fixing all of the problems, then I'm still paying, we're all still paying the same tax rate as the guy that's still getting sewage backing up in his basement. And he doesn't get his problem fixed because we didn't go all the way.
Well, this will, from what Andrea has told me, Area 3 is the worst
Right.
area, and this will definitely take care of that area. And Ward 1 is the worst for other flooding issues, and so it will also address that.
Well, I'm going to say, what we're talking about is all underground. No one sees it. So it's not pretty stuff. And so no one knows it's even there until it rains. And to Dave's point, in Ward 3, when there's sewage backing up, I bet that guy I mean, there's a gentleman who comes in here a lot and kind of yells at us, which he has every right because, I mean, he has sewage in his home. And I'm sure he would definitely be in favor of a tax increase because he wants that to stop, and I don't blame him. And so, if we just keep that in the back of our minds all the time, that this is stuff we never see until it rains, and you see it, and the inadequacy of it when we have water in our streets. I mean, water should go away if we have a proper
Right.
drainage system.
One of the things I wanted to mention, Dave, because you mentioned the $8 million fix, that was related to sewer separation. Because I do hear that $8 million number pop up. That was just related to separating all of our sewers, because we researched that because we thought that the IEPA would be mandating that we move forward with separating them. They haven't yet. They keep threatening it, but there's other cities that have way more combined sewers than we do, and it would be a huge burden. But
That separation too, I mean, another point, that separation of the sewers would do a lot when it comes to what kind of flow we've got going into our
Right.
sewage treatment facility too.
right, I guess my point was that it's a lot more than 8 million. That was
Yeah,
just
you're
for the
correct.
sewer separation, and that was many years ago that those numbers were put together.
Is there a way to do an analysis too, Dave, you hit this, to, by addressing those, and I'm not sure if you can, but to address everything that we want to address with a bond issuance versus what it would look like if we piecemeal this thing over the next 10, 20 years? What's the cost? What's the cost savings? We will save money. It's going to be more upfront, but the fact of the matter is over the course of time, it will be less expensive. Is there a way to do an analysis on that?
Sure, we could do a present value analysis on that for you.
So do we need to vote on this or just kind of?
No, I just needed to know if the council was in favor of issuing debt. And then what will happen is I'll talk to our financial advisors and we'll start the process of getting a bond rating. And it would likely be done by Moody's. And they will go through a process of interviewing myself and Laura and Gary Holm and then preparing that. And then we would be ready to go at any time.
So I guess my question comes is that, you said, and the memo was 5 million, and you had just said that you were thinking of bumping it to 6 million so we can complete Ward 1 and Ward 3.
Right.
I'm all in favor, Area 3. I'm all in favor of that. Absolutely. I would say let's do that. And then you had mentioned maybe go to a 10 million. That additional 4 million, what would that be for?
It would be for other flooding projects. Right now in the budget, I'm not sure if it's going to stay in Wilson from College, I think.
Yes,
Do you recall what the other
Wilson
street
and
was?
College.
There is some aging
Mahoney Creek.
infrastructure there that needs to be repaired, and that's about 900,000. And so there was discussion about staging that because we wouldn't have enough for all of that and this.
So do we have,
There are plenty of projects.
Right.
There are definitely plenty of projects. We were just trying to determine, would it make more sense to do it in two, you have interest rate risk if you wait, but you also are paying interest if you aren't ready to do the project.
Right.
So we were trying to balance that. So as long as I know that you're supportive of issuing debt, we can do some more research and analysis on what we think is the best, if we think it's to wait and do 2 issues, or if we should do all of it now. And I can come back to you and present that to you.
Can you
Maybe-
tell us what our total expenses are, what we're looking?
Lucy, use the mic.
Can you tell us what we're looking at as far as total expenses go, what we estimate them to be? I mean, how much will be, if we issue $10 million, what will be left?
I cannot tell you that right now.
Gary would-
I don't think that they have put all of the projects into their CIP just because they didn't think that it would be possible to complete them all. And it's hard to get really good numbers on everything. But in the 4 years, I think they have 8 million in just, Ward 1 and Area 2 and 3 are $8 million just for those 2 projects. So we could easily, with the other projects that we have, use the money.
Susan?
Peggy, as we talk about these very large numbers, can you even kind of close to project what an average tax bill would increase?
I'm glad you asked that question because I meant to say that and then I got sidetracked on the 8 million. There probably will be just a minor increase, if at all, because we're expecting that our EAV will grow based on the estimated EAV we just got back from the county. So an increase of 300,000, that's the amount that we were going to recommend that we increase the levy. Could be just maybe $20 to a $300,000 home, if that.
So this will put a much faster, bigger dent in stormwater versus a utility.
No, there is no difference if it's a stormwater utility or a property tax, except how you collect it.
Right.
But
I mean,
whether we issue the debt,
The bond is the difference.
the bonds don't impact what the source of the repayment is.
Right, no, I understand
Oh,
that.
okay.
But you have the money up front
Yes.
to be able to fund these projects versus watching it trickle in through a utility and then saying, okay, now we can afford to pay this because you
Right.
have all the money to start out with.
It wouldn't matter, because the utility could go out and bond out.
Right, I understand that too.
Right. No difference if it's a property tax or a stormwater
Other than
utility.
you can write the property tax off on the
Right.
tax return.
Right,
Or if it's a utility or.
right,
Talk about all kinds of things.
right. The source of the repayment doesn't impact that.
Okay, so does anybody have a heart attack with them pursuing this further?
No, I think it's clear that we all are willing to get debt, but I am interested in hearing from Gary how the project would,
Right.
what the optimal, project he would like to manage with what money and then what the nice to haves would be and that type of thing and lay out the different aspects of the project.
Okay. We will bring that back to you. Then we'll start some of the legwork of issuing the debt and bring back the different options. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Lucy. All right, next discussion is item number 6, which is Resolution 17-116R, Master Service Agreement with NetSource Solutions Incorporated, memo from Howard Chasen. Alderman Atek.
Yes, okay. This is about the Public Works cable that you are recommending be replaced because it's not operating up to par.
Correct. 116, 117 are hand in hand. One is the agreement with the company, of course, and one is the task order, which is based on an RFP that we put out to do the work. The cabling at our Public Works facility is at least 20 years old. For any of the techies on the council, it's Cat 5 or Category 5. It runs extremely slow. We have had some issues where people are starting to save some of the bigger files. We have a lot of people who use AutoCAD, GIS, other mapping files, and they're starting to save some things on their C drive because the performance has been affected. Some of the other issues is the stability of the cable. There's some cable hanging down from the ceiling tiles. We've had multiple people over the years pull the cable and terminate it. So there's very little documentation. So what we would like to do is have a company come in now that the ceiling's all cleaned up at Public Works from the previous work they've done this year, and pull out the old cable and install Cat 6A, Category 6A cable. So that would give us the ability to run at 10 gig from the farthest part of the building to the rack. The other issue we're having is the closet that we're using is overloaded, and there's really no room to work in there. So we are going to be moving the wiring closet to another area on the second floor. It's almost right across the hallway from where it's at now. And that'll give Bob some space also for some of the fiber that he needs to pull it. Out of the 6 qualified proposals that we received. NetSource was the lowest price at $60,720. I checked references, they checked out fine. So that's our recommendation.
Thank you, Howard. Are there any questions?
Yes. I noticed in the bid and in the paperwork here that they talk about using non-name brand hardware. We're not doing that, correct? We are using.
No, I don't want to
brand.
put in substandard
Right, I was just gonna say,
cable.
having dealt
I
with
know
enough
the
of
cable
that.
that I recommended in the RFP, and, that's their way to get their foot in the door. But even with the cable that I recommended, it's still the lowest bid.
Okay.
And based on that, I'm assuming the difference is prevailing wages. That's why if I was doing the same thing, I'd probably see it a little cheaper in my business.
I'm sorry, but
At my business, I think I would see it cheaper, but is it the prevailing wages that are
yes,
skewing it?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's hard for me to
That
make
we
the
have-
apples
that
to
would-
apples comparison.
That was in the RFP.
Still not as expensive as the school district paid for each drop that they did.
All right, would someone like to make a motion for the approval of Resolution 17-116-R, authorizing a master service agreement with NetSource Solutions Incorporated?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Would someone like to make a motion for the approval of Resolution 17-117-R, authorizing task order number 1 with NetSource Solutions, Inc., to install a structured cable system at the Public Works facility?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Who was the motion and the second on that?
Stark. And someone over there.
Second.
Mark?
Got it?
Yep, thanks.
Are both of those items on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Did we vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay. Item number 8, Resolution 17-118-R, Budget Amendment for VUE Works Implementation. Memo from Howard, Alderman Atek.
Okay, the Public Works facility has purchased an asset management program called VWorks, and they started doing work on it, as I understand, and implemented several changes, and then stopped. And then the budget, they didn't use the money, and we didn't carry it forward this year. So what you're looking for is the rest of the money?
Correct.
It's budgeted?
We did, have been working on implementing the asset program, asset management program at Public Works. We've got all 4 divisions on the system right now on a portion of it. So they are doing work order, service requests, and some other items. We brought in GIS, and they went live at the beginning of the year. There is some additional work that needs to be done, such as the converting some of the previous electric data into the system. So at the end of the year, we can do the financial reporting that's necessary for the comprehensive annual financial report. In addition to the financial reporting, I know the electric staff wants to have all the history of the repairs into the system, which I agree with. So to do that, we are going to need some money this year. And then next year, we're going to look at some other valuation applications or modules that we purchase, and we'll implement those next year along with some of the public-facing modules that I know the council really wants to get going. And we're also looking at next year getting some mobile devices out in the field for our staff. So those items for next year are in next year's budget, which you'll see in another few weeks. But for right now, we really wanted to get moving, and we have sort of talked about it and started making some plans for this conversion for the electric division, and we would like to start that this year. So come January or so, we can start pushing forward and getting that data and information ready for year-end close. So typically what I had been doing is carrying the budget forward year after year. This year, I happened to miss the deadline. So we have contracts already with Rupert Milkie, who's helping us with the implementation, but now I don't have a budget for it. So that's what I'm looking for. Not any increase in what we're doing, just dotting the i's and crossing the t's for the contract, so we had the budget.
So Lucy, though, if it wasn't in the budget, where's the money coming from?
Well, it was in last year's budget, and as I said, I just didn't get a chance to carry it forward. If I had met the deadline, and I take responsibility for that, it would have been carried forward, most likely with what Peggy does at the beginning of the year.
So it was in last year's budget, but
It
it didn't
was.
get spent and it didn't get carried forward.
Correct. So it's not anything above or beyond what the council has already approved. It's just getting it into this year's budget. And next year, I've rebudgeted some of the additional money. Again, it's not beyond any of the contract work that the council has already approved with Rupert Milkie.
So that will be about $15,000 next year.
Use the mic, please.
That will be about $15,000 next year, what, am I,
You know, I didn't bring that amount.
All right, that's are there any questions? Marty?
Yeah, I was just going to, when you were talking about the infrastructure behind the scenes for those programs and applications, a lot of those things are going to be promoting a lot of greater efficiency and a lot of time savings for, in the long run, that I think a lot of the customer or the citizenry are requiring, and it's going to help be able to implement a lot of those things for making government.
Yeah, it already is automating some of the processes and communication with the residents. So when people work on a service request now for a resident, if they want to give out their email to the staff, anytime that service request is touched, someone goes out to work on it and they take a look at it and decide, okay, here's what we're going to have to do. Anytime that happens, the resident gets an email showing that, yes, this is progressing or this is what's happening. They're also able to store more information. The electric division is putting all their projects in the system, so getting this other electric information in here is very critical to their work.
And that's one of the things I think that people are going to see. They might not understand this, but when it rolls out, they're going to be, wow, I actually can have hands-on practical application for these things that will affect their lives.
Yeah, what happens as we keep moving forward with this project and we get more and more history into the system, staff is going to have more at their fingertips to answer calls and quickly get responses back to residents as opposed to going and looking something up. It's going to create efficiencies for the engineers, for the street division, for really everybody who's using it. I know it's already created some efficiencies for wastewater as they've been able to put all their monthly tasks in the program and then just print it out and hand it out. It's also going to keep job costs for different projects when they start really utilizing it by having some of that electric data into the system. So,
yep, I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
Dan?
Yeah, I think it's a nice system.
How soon until we see some of these bells and whistles on the app or on the website? I know we've had discussions even as recently as last month or a month before that about real estate signs. And if you saw a violation, you could take a picture of it on your phone and
Yes.
press a button on an app
Well,
and you've just reported this violation or
It's
whatever.
funny, during the budget season, I was looking at a few other applications because ViewWorks didn't have an application. They had a citizen portal. And I called them and I went to one of their work study events that they had up in Wisconsin and talked to them, and they finally said they are coming out with something. It should be out before the end of the year. It's a very simple application, but it does exactly what you want. If the resident sees something, they'll be able to get the application on their phone. They'll be able to take a picture of it. They'll be able to GPS it and send a service request in. The next morning or possibly that day, depending on when the resident does this, our staff will see that, hey, this came in, what do we need to do to follow up with it? Who is it going to get routed to? And that's done automatically once they finish setting up the service request. So we're hoping that that's going to happen maybe in the first 6 months of next year, provided that the application works. The one challenge that we're having to all of these web apps that we want to put on our website is finding a common ground for authentication. We don't want to have a resident log in and have a username and a password for a permit system and then have a separate one to enter service request or to pay their utility bill. So that's something that's still hanging out there. We have a few ideas on what we might be able to do, and but that hasn't been completely decided. So we want to make this process as seamless as we can for the residents and as simple as we can.
And if the project for reporting that your power is out is not already in line, let's put that one in line.
Susan?
Howard, today I was on the City of Geneva's website, and they have an interactive map that shows like which projects are in process and where they are in terms of like, is it going to Plan Commission? Is it going, like where it is in public hearings, et cetera? Is that something that is available within our software too?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
We're on the same platform.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
as
good.
them.
That's what I guess the underlying question was. I have to say I was pretty impressed because I could click on any one of a dot, like 4 or 5 dots in town and see exactly what the status was on a project.
I had thought we already had a map in the Public Works Engineering Division that showed projects. I don't know if I think they show where they're at in the project. I don't know if they've shown what public meetings they've been to, but I can look at that and check with Rahad.
Check it out.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed because, you know, it would save a lot of that, like trying to scroll through the calendar and figure out like what meeting I need to go to and on what day, because it was all right there.
Okay.
We'll take a look at it.
We'll take a look, yes.
I have just a procedural question. I'm in support of this, but obviously you're over budget by this amount. If there was another area within your budget that you were under budget for and could make this up, you know.
I wouldn't be here.
Okay.
Plus,
That's what I wanted to confirm.
plus, yeah, as much as I like to visit you on my biannual trips here, the other reason is this that I'm asking for is in the electric fund, and a lot of the work we do is in the general fund. I can't move money out of my budget.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Would someone like to make a motion to approve Resolution 17-118-R authorizing a budget amendment to account 2164-6355 for $45,260?
So moved.
Second.
Who said second?
Callahan.
A lot of us.
Elliot? Okay. All
Callahan.
This whole stuff.
right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. I think that can go to consent also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can a budget amendment, can that go on consent?
No.
Oh, it can't?
I didn't
All
think
right.
so.
Sorry.
And the benefits for that, I think if we address that to let people know that there's a huge benefit in the long run that's going to be immediately noticed.
Yeah. Well, this system is the back end, of course, for any public-facing
Yes,
module.
but it's the kind of the nuts and bolts that have to be put at when the big, nice thing does come out.
Yes. There's a lot of people who have programs, and I get solicitations multiple times a day that we have this system. It's a mobile app, but it stops and ends at the mobile app. There's nothing behind it. And that's great if you just want to keep simple information and send it out. But you know, our goal is to keep everything related to GIS and keep a history. So that way, the engineers and some of the other folks can go back and see that history when they're planning projects, and also track expenses, repairs, and so forth. So it's easier dig up information for the residents. Should make them much more efficient. Okay.
Okay, so it'll go on the
Thank you.
regular agenda. All right. Next item, item number 9, which is the disposition, I guess is the right word, of the Tomley Building, request for proposal for acquisition and redevelopment. And Laura, do you want to start us out with that?
Sure, this was before you a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed what we wanted to do with the Tomley Building, and a number of different possibilities were presented. And what was decided was that we wanted to sell the Tomley Building, but have an RFP so that we could understand what types of redevelopment were possible in order to determine which of those redevelopment opportunities we wanted to pursue so that we could make sure we have the best possible use in that building. So following that meeting, I think people had some questions for Chris Aston, who wasn't able to attend that meeting, as to some of the uses that people who had contacted you when the article came out in the Chronicle about the Tomley Building. If you could just mention what people had suggested as possible uses.
Well, in some cases, it was just an investment plan, to buy the building and continue to lease it. In fact, in some cases, they were going to honor the existing program, and that was fine. I think, again, it was a plan to invest money in real estate, and so that was pretty generic. And in other cases, we talked specifically about what might be accomplished at the site, anywhere from utilizing the subterranean, the floor immediately below street level, which is about 700 square feet, like all of the floors, as a kitchen, and then in order to utilize the first and the second floor for seating. So that was that's a project that would amount to a fairly large investment, but the person had some experience doing that, and he thought that it might be worth considering. Another along the same lines, again, involving a restaurant, was actually doing an addition out of the building. As you know, the property is about 4 times the size of the footprint of the building, although it's oddly shaped, but it's fairly deep. And because it's deep, it has a lot of frontage immediately along the path, and therefore the views of the river. So the thought was if we could extend the building back. Now, that would complicate it because, frankly, at least in the existing mapping, the regulatory floodplain is shown to cover the rear of the lot. So unless they were to get a map amendment, they would have to deal with any addition into the floodplain. I mean, that could be accomplished, of course, through creating piers, but it wouldn't be cheap. But let's assume that you could get contact with the bedrock and just put it on the rock the same way the pylons or piers were done at Walgreens. So, I mean, there are possibilities of extending the building, but what probably is a consideration without having all that expense is just building a deck. And that was discussed in the projects that you had seen before, the Grodecki project, I believe the gentleman's name was, and then the Cochran Real Estate had wanted to do a project involving building a deck onto the property as well. That was in conjunction with acquiring the 4-6 building, Bobby Gunter's building. That did not happen. So it's been along those lines. Some of it's been just simple. I always want to buy the building because I want to invest in real estate. Others have been more grand in their planning. Some have talked about actually using it for their own retail space. So, I mean, I think it opens up a lot of ideas. So we put together the RFP and actually suggested potential projects within it. So you had a whole list of alternative scenarios where someone could literally just say, I want to buy the building and here's the amount of money I want to pay, to I want to buy the building and I want to redevelop it, to I want to, for either leasing or selling without a known user, to I want to buy the building and I want to redevelop and expand it, and I also want to do a TIF deal. And in that TIF deal, I'd like some consideration, either in the acquisition price or some other way for the city to participate in a partnership with the private entity to redevelop the property with the intent of increasing the value of the property as it's assessed, so that that would be a TIF pay-as-you-go type scenario, and that the new increment would pay back whatever participation, whether it just be in writing down the cost of the acquisition or whether it be in actual capital improvements. So again, we wrote the RFP accordingly, and our suggestion is to publish it and try to get responses back in December. And we did just learn that the existing tenant will, when her lease, she was given an extension of lease till the end of January, and she doesn't want to extend it beyond that. I did have another potential incubator type use, but even under that condition, it was they were wondering if they could get in before Christmas, and that's obviously not going to happen now, and that's fine. So I'm purely flexible as to what I think is to move forward. I don't know what's going to come in. All along, my opinion has been it'd be great if we could redevelop the site and get better utilization, more utilization of that property. It's kind of underutilized with a small building, but again, that would take an addition to the building somehow. So that's where we're at, and the staff is recommending that you approve the RFP. It was included as an attachment to the memo, and then direct staff to go out and publish it and distribute it to potential prospective redevelopers or purchasers. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Dan?
So we first met about this on the 3rd, and I generally was not in favor of unloading this building yet. I think that if we hung on to it for just a couple more years, waiting for whatever happens at 1 North Washington, I think the property will be worth a little bit more. I recognize that I was definitely in the minority for that, but not even a week later, we discussed taking a lot of retail out of 1 North Washington. So I'm curious, do you think that this Tomley building has now gone up in value because we've limited some of the retail, or do you think that because we're now honing in on putting more residents in this area and changing this 1 North Washington project, do you think that the Tomley building, this is truly the right time to sell it, and this is the best price we're going to get for it?
I don't know that this is the best price we're going to get for it. It's been listed, kind of silently listed, but at least through CoStar at $160,000, and no one has offered to buy that. But the retail space is very small. I mean, it's 700 square feet, and there is an upstairs space, but one could say, well, you could always expand your retail. And in fact, Bree with Fawn Gifts has some retail product up there for sale. It's not something you can see by looking at the window, obviously, but if you go upstairs, you'll see it. You can also potentially have another tenant up there, but that tenant would have to share the stairs. As he goes through the retail space, he'd share the bathroom downstairs. And so it's tough to get 2 users there, and that would probably maximize. I mean, at one point, we were offering it for leasing each space individually. And in fact, when Catherine Sanzari with West DuPage Cabinet and Granite leased it, she just leased the one story, but over time, she kind of, took over the second story, and with the understanding that it was still for lease, but, she was able to utilize it that way. So, but to answer your question, my thinking, and I said it last week, that all of the tenant spaces in downtown stand to be more valuable if and when the 1 Washington project is built. And that's whether, in my opinion, whether it includes more retail or not on Wilson Street, because I just think that the foot traffic will increase, and you're bound to attract more retailers just because they need foot traffic. Whereas destination uses like counseling or metaphysical or whatever service type use, or lawyers or accountants, they don't necessarily rely on ancillary or coincidental traffic. They got an appointment, person comes in, they split. Whereas if you go shopping, you tend to want to go to 1 or 2 or 3 places as long as you're down there and you're parked. So, and if this case, if the Washington Place project were to be built, you're already down there, so. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to have an immediate effect on the value of the building. I would think, though, that if there was an announcement that the project was going to move forward, there'd be more interest in the building than if there was an announcement saying the project's not going to move forward. That's my personal opinion, but I think that's the case.
And one other question, which you probably could stick a pin in for the One North Washington project, they discussed in that retail space in the building, there's this one like weird L-shaped space that they didn't think they were going to be able to rent. They thought it was going to be probably
At the far east end, yeah.
What if that became an incubator space? And it'd be an interesting thing to talk about.
Well, it would, and one of the things that we talked about in suggesting alternative uses, the memo that I wrote for last week, right, or I guess the third, indicated that maybe there's a way to utilize the proceeds from the sale of the building to create an incubator space where we would essentially provide monies as a subsidy to the landlord, so the landlord could offer their space at, say, $9 a square foot when the market rate is 12. And why would the landlord want to do that? Well, the city's program would make up the difference to incubate that business till it moved on. Or, if it moved on, or better yet, stayed there and became a market rate tenant, then we look for the next space that's available if there's an incubator space. But that involves a program, and in this case, it's self-funded through the proceeds. But what I came to understand in talking to staff from the meeting was that the majority of the opinion was we don't want to tie that 160 or whatever we get to a program like that. And that's fine too. But that was one alternative that was suggested in the first memo.
I just thought it'd be interesting because I've been kind of thinking about that they had this space and that they already thought that they were going to have some trouble renting. I'm maybe less worried about getting rid of an incubator space if maybe we could negotiate maybe.
That space may rent at a lower rate regardless of whether there was a subsidy involved or not. I mean, maybe because it'd be so lesser desirable by its odd shape that perhaps we wouldn't have to subsidize it at all. Maybe they would offer it at that price. I will say, though, that I think that the value associated with the space in One Washington Place was going to be, at least the thought was, in 3 years, all of the market would be better, and that they would not be renting that space at something close to the lower end of the market, but rather the higher end. It's new space. It's articulated so to allow for different tenancies. But we heard a story last week about how he didn't think that space was going to be easy to rent one way or the other. So,
other questions on the RFP? Everybody agree we should go out for it? Chris, where would you advertise this at? How would you advertise it?
I haven't put that much thought into it. I mean, you have to do a published notice, and so that could happen just in any, paper of general circulation. I would think it might be worth buying space in one of the journals, but that's going to be expensive space. I think you do direct mailing to known entities that, may be interested, certainly to the brokers, developers or builders. And we've got a pretty list of those people. I don't think you have to go very far. You're not looking for someone to create, a $30, $40 million project. You're just looking for someone to buy the building and know that the city's interested in someone being creative and trying to maximize the value of the building once they own it. So I haven't thought beyond just the actual published notice, except for the direct mailing end of it.
Would you even just email, like, say, the Fox Valley Realtors Association or something like that?
Sure.
Put them on.
And I could contact, there's something called Kane County Connects through their economic development office, community development department, but they've got some guy that spearheads their economic development efforts. So get the notice out there, and he could put it out to other, his regular mailing list. But I'll put more thought into that.
The more exposure, the better, obviously.
Of course,
yeah. All right, so everybody's in favor of pursuing the RFP?
Dave?
Marty?
Just, so when we were originally looking at the One North Washington property, and back in 2013, we were trying to decide what we were going to do with the First Baptist Church. we kind of set the expectations when we were kind of throwing it out to everybody. Bring us your best ideas. We're open to keeping all of it, demolishing the 50s if you want, the 50s part of the building, the 30s part of the building, but leaving the church, or all of it. And we set those expectations right off the bat. I would propose that my thinking is we wouldn't want somebody coming in with an RFP that says, I want to demolish this and put something in.
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of want to see no plans for demolishing that building.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. That is specifically listed in the RFP, that we're looking for redevelopment plan exclusive of demolition and removal of the building. It's actually listed on our local historic preservation district inventory of buildings as a significant building. So I wouldn't suggest that we have someone scrape the property because it is a significant building in the district. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Right, but that was where I just want to make sure that we're all kind of thinking that same thing, that we're all, so that we're not 6 months and have a plan come before us and say, well, I know it says this, but would you be open? You know, the expectations would be right off the bat, no thank you, if that's what it is, or we would entertain it. I'm a no thank you at all to seeing that building go.
Is that the consent of the council as well? I mean, obviously, if we did not list that as I put it in there, it opens the door to other proposals, but I just kind of felt that it was probably unlikely anyone's going to approve it. And, you know, I thought I'd, like you say, establish the expectations.
Correct.
But I'm...
It kind of limits us, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Limits us a great deal. I mean, we have a building, and I understand the historic nature of it all.
Oh, it limits us considerably.
We're considerably limited. I mean, what we can do with 700 square feet.
No question. Aside from building onto it, and again, there bound to be, at least presently, you know, floodplain issues on that. But there's no question if you were to say, hey, we're willing to let you propose a demo, scrape it, and build a, you know, let's see if you got, you know, maybe an 8,000 square foot building, you know, 4,000, well, you couldn't get that much, but you could, depends if you go 3 stories, I suppose, but, you know, you could get significant amount of building on that property.
In downtown Batavia. I mean, it'd be the heart of our city, right along the bridge. I mean, and I'm all for the historic nature of the city of Batavia, but, I mean, this building, we've been incubating businesses, which is a nice thing to do, you know, it's people are successful, but it does nothing more for the city. I mean, it's just sitting there. It's really a white elephant. And you know, I mean, years ago, I mean, we tore down most of our city, the old buildings. I mean, as the mayor says, this building here, only but for the vision of Mayor Brown, Dave's dad, we have this building. And I'm not for tearing things down, but if it has really no value to us, maybe somebody would want to pay more than $160,000 for that building, knowing that they're going to have to invest more money, but they're going to have a pretty nice building in the center of our downtown on the river. So it's just something to consider. I don't know.
I'm open to suggestion.
I have a question too. Yeah, I agree with you, Mike, because I think there comes a point in time where it costs more to redo the building than what it's worth. And in this particular situation, don't we own it because nobody wanted it?
Well, I think it was fallen in disrepair, and, you know, kind of like demolition by neglect. It wasn't being watched over, so the city came in. I don't remember the exact history. I thought there might have been an issue for eminent domain.
It was.
What Bill told me it
Yeah,
is.
you got
was.
eminent domain.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you know, thank God we're the landlord.
Right.
I mean, and I meant that somewhat facetiously.
we got a
because
proposal.
When you get a call and someone tells you they got a mouse in their bathroom, you're like going, oh, okay, I guess that's our job now. But anyways, yeah, we're not in the landlord business,
Right.
incidentally.
If we got a proposal that somebody did want to tear it down and build a nice new place that was economically feasible and was going to do well for the city, we would want to entertain that. I would think.
I would be interested.
I would, I'm sorry.
I would be interested in keeping options open and seeing what comes.
Lucy, use the mic.
Be interested in keeping options open and seeing what comes through.
Yeah.
Similarly, I would prefer to see, I mean, the limestone is to me the beauty part of that. You know, but if somebody can propose something that I think the council would be interested in hearing that is going to open up a view to the river, since it is riverside, and still preserve the look and charm of the limestone building on that front, and be a more picturesque building, both inside and out, I'd entertain it.
Scott?
Scott?
The one thing I would caution about demolishing the building is it is floodplain. And if you do demolish that building, you may not be able to rebuild it in that place or in that same fashion. So you may reduce the utility of that building. You may be able to build onto it, you know, with stilts or something like that. But if you demolish that, you're taking a non-conforming building that's in a floodplain, and you may not be able to replace it. So,
Well, I would think though, Scott, that someone were to buy that building before they tore it down, before they purchased it, they'd have their plan in hand and make sure that they're in compliance with floodplain regulations. So I don't think that's, I mean, point taken, but who's ever going to buy that building and they're looking to put something up? Well, I would hope do their homework with that kind of a sizable investment. So I wouldn't let that be something to say, don't do anything right now.
You know, to Scott's point and to everyone else's point here, I've got a proposal to make here. I'm just thinking about this, and I've seen in other parts of town where they've completely demolished a historic building, but left the facade. So somebody with some real imagination and maybe get around the fact of rebuilding in a floodplain, if you leave the facade, so you're not demolishing, you're remodeling. And so maybe it would be interesting to see what kind of creative ideas somebody could come up with, because I agree with what everybody's saying. You don't want to demolish the historic building. We spent a lot of money, time, and effort into preserving this building, but yet if somebody could take that building and incorporate it into a development of that property to get that 8,000 square feet of a brand-new building on the riverfront, wouldn't we be interested in listening to that?
Absolutely.
They do that in Chicago all the time.
Right.
Chris, I have a question about, and this is one of those economic development things I need a little help with. So let's say there's someone, you know, with a whole pocket full of money and wants to buy the building and use it as is for, my normal go-to is a knitting store, but we're going to go with a men's specialty tool store.
I thought you were going to go to haberdashery.
Okay, we'll go with haberdashery to go along with Beards Guard. They can go over and get their clothes after they get their beard trimmed. Why is that not a good use of that property? Why would we say that is not a good use of the property?
I think it is good use. Yeah. It's a specialized use. I mean, they could come by tomorrow and lease it or buy it, you know, and in the future, the lease that's there is a short-term gig, you know.
But it just seems like we're always looking for a more elaborate, bigger, more square footage along the river, more, just, you know, because when we talk about like selling the building, the first thing that comes into my mind is someone, you know, the people who opened the Royal Wren in Geneva. You know, their first thought was Batavia, and they wound up being on 3rd Street. They always really want to be on 3rd Street. Their business, they're knocking it out of the park there. And I look at them and say, that's the kind of business that would be an outstanding business to have in downtown Batavia if someone wanted to buy that building. But when we talk about it, we're always like, oh, how about a restaurant? How about something that uses more of the lot? And so I just wondered why.
I got to tell you, a boutique retailer, could use 700 square feet and make an awful lot of money is a jeweler. You know, you just a bunch of cases with small items. I certainly wouldn't dismiss that as not just a good use, but we could use a fine jewelry store in downtown Batavia. I'm open to the status quo right now is for sale or lease, and I guess the RFP would open up the door to other things. But in the meantime, if someone were to come, first of all, it's a permitted use outright. So if someone were to come and wanted to sell fine hats or jewelry or a tobacconist or somebody that, you know, wants to utilize a small space but can make real money on per square foot basis, all they need to do is get a sign permit and they're in.
And what if they didn't care about making real money? What if they had so much money that it was just a hobby? Would we care?
I would, because I'll tell you my experience is hobby retailers, sometimes they come to work, sometimes they come in late. You know, I really seen that before. You know, it's a classic stereotype, but the guy who owns more than he can ever use, and his wife really has a passion to sell antiques, and he's like, well, it's great. I'd like to get these things out of this house anyways. Go sell them. And then she gets up on a Monday and she decides she wants to drive to, you know, I don't know, wherever she goes. And what happens is people come to the store and they see it's closed and they get a little upset. And that tends to depreciate the experience. And I'm not saying that would necessarily have, but hobby retailers can be sometimes detrimental to the district.
Okay.
So do we want to open the RFP to further, to make it a broader RFP, I guess is the question.
I'd be in agreement with that.
I think so too.
Yes.
Well, I would just, you know, there's just language in here I would just take out that specifically excludes the possibility of a demo and you know, essentially scrape the property and leave it open to that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to what they have to say, and we don't have to sell it, right?
Right.
Right.
And I would think if somebody were to come to you and say, hey, I do want to scrap it, I would still probably throw out the idea that, hey, we like the facade.
Sure.
And that way they don't just come in and say, I just want to tear it down and build a 4-story building there and brick building or concrete.
I know the answer to this question is probably, well, that's what we hired you to do, but in all reality, I've always been in favor of getting a broker. I mean, trying to sell it from the city, listing it on CoStar, even listing it on our webpage, it's not the same as actually having someone that's got some skin in the game that
I agree.
is going to try to, for a 5% commission or whatever we pay, to me, it seems like a better way to handle it.
If we want to sell it, we should hire somebody to sell it. Right?
I
We're
mean, they have all the skin in the commission, and they're getting calls from people probably more than I am. Hey, you know, I understand you're a commercial broker. Where can I find, you know, 1,400 square feet to do this, you know? And I think it would at least stimulate the interest.
I would support that.
I would support that for sure.
Well, maybe we do is we go out and let people know we're looking for a broker and ask for some quotes and try to get the commission down as low as possible. And they might see it as a foot in the door. I mean, we've been dispensing property, and Scott and I have talked about this, but it's kind of at a slow rate, you know, because we don't really have someone out there that's working on our behalf to sell or lease our own property.
Well, since we're not in a huge hurry to do this, we've been talking about it and such, but why don't you go back and go to the drawing board with some ideas on hiring a broker and come back to us with a plan with how you would approach the broker with an RFP and what it would cost, and what do you think, Laura?
Yes, I like that.
Scott?
I would just, on the low commission side of that, I don't necessarily think that should be the deciding criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're getting someone who's going to, you know, scrape rock bottom for their commission, and maybe just some guy with a limited amount of network, a limited network. So I think we need to decide, we need to figure out who it is.
No, I agree, and I think there are certainly people in the Fox River Valley that are more aggressive and certainly more successful than others when it comes to leasing commercial.
Yeah, I'd rather pay additional points and get what we want
Get
in
it
there.
done.
And there's some with a bigger Rolodex than others, and some with a Rolodex that's got more qualifications than others.
Yep.
Rolodex.
Sorry?
Rolodex, that's a funny old word that
Rolodex,
nobody
you ever
knows.
heard of that?
Of course, we
It's okay.
have.
I'm sorry, Marty.
Say
I
iPhone
just can't help
When you go to their LinkedIn page, you see they've got one connection. That's not a good sign.
Is there an app for that? You say Palm Pilot, wow.
So let me report back within the next couple of weeks on that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, next item then is the discussion on the One Washington Place. As you all know, we had this discussion last week with the developer here. We had a lot of discussion about the validity of what his comments were and his concerns. So that's why we are back here tonight, to have some further discussion. I know, Laura, you wanted to make a statement before we open it up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share some thoughts at the beginning of this discussion. First of all, like you, I am disappointed that we are put in the position to consider going through what was a very laborious and time-consuming process and that should we decide that we like this redesign or that there's some compromise that might be struck on the composition of this building, that it's going to have to go back through that Plan Commission HPC process. Now, Dave Patzelt did apologize for getting it wrong and on the cost of the excavation and what it would cost to build the parking under that commercial space, and that's in large part responsible for the cost differential that has brought us to this point. While I appreciate his humility, I think that the bigger question is, does what Shodine now proposes to the city, is this something that will meet the future needs of our community? And Chris Aston did a fine job of putting together the pros and cons, so I don't feel it necessary to reiterate those. But from my perspective on this, it seems like your decision comes down to whether it's better to strike a compromise with this developer or give up what both I think Marty and Scott were describing as the dream or the desire to have that commercial space there on the north side of that particular block of Wilson Street. Or do we go back to the drawing board with a different project, whether that would be with this developer or with another developer? If we're looking at this from a strictly financial perspective, I think the answer to that question is easy. The amount of lost sales tax that would come from removing the commercial, I think that really pales in comparison to the tax increment and the economic power of having those additional residents in our downtown would bring an increment of, $800,000 to $1 million per year over the course of the TIF and beyond. I mean, once the TIF expires, then that's revenue that is shared among all of the taxing bodies. But it's not a question that we're just looking at from a financial perspective. We also have to decide what would be best from a community planning perspective. And I firmly believe that business development in the heart of downtown is driven by the existence of consumers being present in that environment. And to a certain extent, Batavia has already done that. We made a significant investment in Houston Street and North River Street, and we've attracted more consumers to the area. And I think we've seen some storefronts which were perennially empty now have businesses in them. Maybe, they're not the highest end types of retail, but some things are starting to happen. I think with knowing that 194 residential units are coming to the One Washington Place development is likely to start or to prompt the startup of businesses who want to take advantage of those consumers being in that area. So this is why I think the decision comes down to what is best for downtown Batavia, what's best for Batavia as a whole. Is it having the extension of our commercial business district have this natural expansion to the east? And therefore, that is the spark. But on the other hand, are we letting an economic tiger get away? And so I truly believe that even if we decide that this is not the project, I truly believe that other projects because of the attention that this has had in the media, because it now looks like a redevelopment site, because the city has made an investment in putting together contiguous properties and removing ancillary property rights that existed on that alley. You've poised it for redevelopment. But it's a big risk. You know, we can't say how long it will take until the next opportunity comes our way. And the TIF clock is ticking. Another risk is that other proposals might not have that economic impact of the tax increment and the potential number of new residents in our downtown, or that they might not propose a public parking asset that we so desperately need. End of the day, if it's not right, if it's not the proper fit for our downtown Batavia, then we should wait for a project that we feel comfortable with.
Okay. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to do something a little different tonight than what we normally do. Normally, we have the conversation back and forth between the committee, but there are some people in the audience here tonight that I think would like to address us with what their points are. So I would like to hear what their thoughts are, and then we can have conversation between us. So if anybody from the public would like to address us on this, please come up to the podium and give us your name, and we'll go from there.
Hopefully I'll speak loud enough so you can all hear me. My name is Charlie Corey. I live at 1311 Town Avenue. I've attended several of the Planning Commission meetings on this project and a couple of your cow meetings as well. And I keep hearing, as Laura just said, the whole idea is to develop downtown, the commercial aspect. I keep hearing, let's get our residents and the public to come downtown to shop, to go to restaurants. All well and good. I've heard a lot of things thrown around, and I got very confused at the last meeting. So with that, I want to just talk about one issue, and that being what I call the future of downtown parking in Batavia if this One Washington Place is built. I use the key word, the future of downtown parking. As I know it, the underground parking, the last I heard, was going to generate 335 spaces. And according to the developer, those spaces were going to be very small, which meant that we might have to change the size of the spaces. Which leads me to a comment that Mike said. Here comes another shoe to drop. And I'm just questioning how many shoes will drop. If it's just talking about the size of the parking spaces and they have to get bigger, the 335, as you all know, is reduced. Okay? The Larson Becker lot that we purchased is ultimately going to be developed. It's going to be lost, at least this is my understanding from the conversations I've heard. It's going to be lost as parking. Scott Salvati at the last meeting indicated he was downtown Friday night, 3 to 9. Now I know this is anecdotal, but the bottom line is he observed that with the existing parking, there were very few, if any, open spaces for the residents or the people that want to shop or eat downtown where they could park. That's with the existing spaces. Now everybody's thinking, well, we're going to replace the existing spaces with 335. Well, let's do a little math. On Thursday last week, I met with Laura. She was kind enough to let me in the office and talk to me. I wanted to find out specifically how many spaces do we have in the double-decker parking lot. We have 64 spaces. And of those 64, I took a ride around to the lots that I'm going to give you. There are 3 spots reserved for the ADA. The church parking lot, 65 spaces, none reserved. Larson Becker, 120 spots, 5 reserved for ADA. And I think it was called the Art Stop or the Art Shop.
Art Stop.
45, with 2 reserved for ADA and 2 reserved for business. That adds up to a total of 294 spots downtown. Now, of those spots, 249, because I'm not going to count the Art Stop shop, the parking lot, because I don't see that ever gets filled up, because people will take their lives in their hands crossing 25 or Wilson to get to the restaurants or the shops. So I didn't use this in my 249 spots that are going to be lost when one Washington goes into play. Okay? Those are the 3 spots: the double-decker, the church, and Larson Becker. Ultimately, remember, this is the future. They'll be lost. Now, the last I heard, until just now, I heard 198, but I did the figures on the original 186 apartments. Now, I don't know about you folks, but I have to drive a car to get places. So if all of those apartments are rented, and they're supposed to be rented to empty nesters or millenniums, that was the core demographic that I heard along the line from Shodine. If 186 people have a car, that's 186 more cars downtown. If half as many of that have 2 cars, now you're going to add 279 cars. And if everybody has 2 cars, I know all the empty nesters in my neighborhood have 2 cars. The wife and the husband have 2 cars. Each has a car. They go their separate ways. So now you got spaces up to 372 extra cars coming into the mix in downtown. I look at it this way. If we put 186 extra cars in and we lose 249 spots out of the 279, out of the 186 cars, we'll have open spots out of the 335 of 149, and we lose 249, we're going to be short 100 spots for the future. If we have 1.5 cars, we're going to be short 193 spots. And if we have 2 cars per apartment, we're going to be short 286 spots. Now, who the heck is going to come downtown to shop and eat when they can't park their car? Tell me. You need to think about that, because the future of growth in downtown Batavia is going to be locked up tight because there's no place to park. So I just wanted to say this. I've heard a lot of stuff in the talk, and you guys have too. But as far as I'm concerned, you give this developer an inch, they'll take a mile. And like Mike said, when will the next shoe drop? They're out there, they're going to drop. It reminds me of the days in retail where I spent 40 years. It was called bait and switch. Come in low, go high. Try to sell it high. So I just would appreciate very much if you'd consider the future parking if this project were to go forward, and what it's going to mean for the people trying to come downtown to spend their money. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please come up and just use the mic and give us your name.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Hurt, and I live about 3 blocks north of the proposed One Washington, so I have a vested interest. Plus, I love coming down River Street and shopping and eating and doing all those things. I'm going to hand out a sketch I did of a proposed alternative plan. And if you forgive me, I'm just going to read my notes in the essence of time because I want to make sure I cover all my thoughts here. But I just got to thinking that maybe we started this project from the wrong end. We've been working on a developer's plan, his proposal, and trying to make it fit for what the Batavians want, rather than coming up with a plan for what we want and then asking the developer to make it work for us. So yesterday I took a few minutes just to daydream about what another plan might look like. I'm not saying it's the right plan or even a good one, but at least it's a new one, it's a different one, and maybe it has some merit. It's kind of a rough back of the napkin sketch, so I hope you can discern a little bit of it. My apologies. But in concept, the existing parking garage remains. And then there's a rectangular U-shaped building on the east half of the block with retail on the Wilson Street side and maybe perhaps wrapping around the corner of Washington Street. I thought that'd be an ideal spot for a coffee shop or bakery. We don't have anything like that on this side of the river. The rest of the building is residential apartments, but nothing higher than 2 stories on the Washington Street level and 3 stories on the sloping part of State and Wilson. This retains the character of the downtown and hopefully allows for the historic view of the Music Matters building from the west. I love driving in from the west and seeing that big limestone building. There's a courtyard in the center of the U-shape with a first floor covered walkway from Washington Street through the courtyard, directly through and down to River Street, which uses the existing stairs from the garage. Thus, patrons can walk from the River Street shops directly up to the courtyard and the retail shops and vice versa, which would open both the retail shops would open on both sides of Wilson and the courtyard. They may not all be able to do that, but at least the ones on the higher elevation could. The courtyard would be a park-like setting with outdoor seating, gardens, and a peaceful fountain. Its use could provide a beautiful outdoor space for residents of the apartments, seating for possible coffee shop or restaurant, and a resting area for shoppers. The courtyard is easily accessible from the parking garage, from River Street, from the residential apartments, and from Washington Street and Wilson. This plan joins all areas into one easily accessible shopping and restaurant area, be it from River Street, Wilson, or the inner courtyard, thus expanding the community feel and increasing the interconnectivity of activities. The plan also allows for a reasonable number of apartments for new residents downtown, not an overabundance. I think 194 is way too many. But this plan calls for a new parking garage where the old gas station used to be, which would be right across the street from the retail shops on Wilson. Perhaps the existing parking garage and or upper level parking would be adequate for the new residents, depending upon the number of apartments built. And the city could retain the temporary parking lot just built by the river as a permanent lot, and maybe even a parking garage on the north end of that. This would also have the advantage of leaving the river view open for enjoyment by all. After all, the river is the gem of this community, and we really don't want the river view blocked. So I'm just hoping that my daydream vision will encourage more of us to daydream about what might be and what might meet our needs in a better way than the proposed One Washington as it stands right now. I think maybe with a collective daydream, we might just do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so let's open it up then to the committee. Who's got comments on what, we had a lot thrown at us. We had some comments tonight. We had a lot thrown at us last week. Been a very long process, 2.5, 3 years. A lot of planning, a lot of conversation, a lot of budgeting. And then, as we all know, we were told just recently that the project was between $6 and $8 million over budget. So we asked the developer to come in here and explain to us why and how, and he did. He presented us with some plans of what he's thinking would work, which would eliminate the retail on Wilson Street, and put more apartments in and eliminate some parking spaces. So we all have to think about, which we've been asked to do over this last week, so we could give some direction to staff as to what we would like to do. One would be to tell the developer, well, we got a project that we've approved, build it or don't. But as far as we're concerned, we've got a project. The other one would be to tell staff to go ahead and work on the financial analysis of the validity of what the developer is proposing. And I guess the other would be to continue to work on the plan with the developer. So what's everybody want to do? Who wants to start? Mark?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot. Obviously, I was not involved in all the discussions you guys had over the time on this, but I was excited about the retail on Wilson as, you know, another thing to kind of drive that whole corridor. It's all retail, and throwing those apartments there kind of takes away from that. And when I asked him, I said, there's no way to do the retail. It was just, the answer is no, no way. And I don't know how much consideration, we talk about compromise, and it's like, well, it's really not a compromise. He's like, here's my offer, and there's nothing in between. So compromise would be that, hey, we started with that, he comes back with something, and then we find somewhere in the middle, if that's what we're going to call a compromise. I'm pretty steadfast on having the retail there. And I know the shapes are funky, but then maybe, I'm a little surprised that he wouldn't have been able to determine those shapes would be funky from the beginning. You know, he's done a lot of developments around the river. He knows slopes and stuff like that. That was a little shocking. It's things like this creative idea here that, hey, there's other ways to accomplish putting retail and second story, third story apartments, et cetera, that would not compromise our desire to have the retail on the first floor there, right on Wilson Street, people walking past it. So this isn't downtown Chicago. I lived on the north side, and yeah, I lived first floor apartment. So that was cool, but that was downtown Chicago. Big difference. We're not Chicago, and we're not Geneva and all the other communities around here. So I want the retail. I don't know how to do it, but I'm not comfortable with taking that out right now.
Elliot?
I think for me, it was kind of what I asked him about, and which was specifically the parking. You know, we were already recognizing that, you know, the project, while it didn't solve the parking shortage, it did yield a net gain of parking spaces, and that I could stomach. You know, we were gaining on the total 31 parking spaces to downtown, and that was before Larson Becker was, you know, taken down and made into a parking lot. But now we're going on an increase of residential units. We're losing the retail space that I think many of us truly wanted. And by gaining residential units, we're also losing some of that net parking as well. What I had a hard time with was, and I understand a developer, any developer, they have to have the project work budgetarily. It has to come together financially. But I didn't see much in the way of where we were not the side taking the hit, because in the end, when this thing is done, the garage belongs to the city. The apartments belong to the developer. So we lose parking spaces. we lose retail on the Vision, they gain additional residential. Where are we partners on that? Could the units have lost a bit of square footage to make for an additional unit or two per floor? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I didn't see where there was a ownership and a willingness to change something so that we were both still getting what we wanted.
Can I just respond on some facts?
Sure.
There. Elliot, I understand your point about the parking, but since we have not updated the parking study, I am not sure that the new proposal is neutral if we gain parking or if we lose parking on it. And the reason being that the commercial spaces require more parking than an individual residence does. So I can't really say for certain until we
Sure.
have that consultant recrunch those numbers.
I'm not speaking to the demand. I'm simply speaking to the pure number of spaces that were going to be available in that, I think it was by my notes, a 19 block area.
Right, right. So in the last, in the plan that was approved, while they were not solving our parking deficit problem, they were improving it.
Correct.
And I'm just not sure which way this swings because the demand has now changed. So we need to put our finger on the demand to say what has the impact been on the supply.
Marty? It's interesting how you brought up a lot of the issues regarding traffic and parking, and because as I've been thinking about this, it kind of equates to a car sale for me. You go out and you want to buy a car. I think we know that we need a car. We know we need downtown residents. But kind of where I feel on this is we spent a year and a half doing our research on the type of car that we wanted, the options that we wanted, all of those things, to be able to have a dollar sign that we could afford and say, I want to be able to buy this car. And now I feel like and part of that was through that entire time that we were doing that, there were some additional, well, we don't have the car on lot that you exactly like. It's a little bit different with this color. And we made those sacrifices as to I could trade off those things till we finally got to the point of let's sign the check and get the keys and get out of here. And I feel like he went back to the manager, came to us and said, your car just left, but I've got a different car for you. And it's a minivan. It's going to hold more people. It doesn't have those bells and features that you wanted. But you still need a car, right? It's kind of like, well, yeah. But if we're spending $14, $16 million on this, I want the car that we talked about for a year and put a lot of thought in to what we wanted. And I want to make sure that we buy what we get or what we wanted. I don't want to buy a car to buy a car. Susan?
I have a couple thoughts on this project. As you know, I've been a supporter of it. And I don't hate the new incarnation of it without retail. I have walked that block many times, and the topography is challenging. It will be odd if it is built with retail to have to go subterranean to some stores and upstairs into others. It's not like you're going to be able to go window shopping across the front of the building because the topography just doesn't lend itself to that. As soon as you get past the Sage Creek Tax Office, the lot starts to slope dramatically. And so that's not anything I had ever looked at before, because in a perfect world, everything is flat and easy to build on. I do like the idea of residences opening right to the street level. That's something that I like. And I also think that it's just another option. I also think that it is an option to explore adding more units to the Route 25 site, like I talked about, and having a donut shape so that it could potentially increase the number of units, which would increase the number of revenue for the developer, or the amount of revenue. And something that we never talk about is there potential to go up another story to add more residences so that the developer is able to be able to afford this. And so, I mean, they're all options. I mean, it's things that, we say we want what we ordered. We can't get what we ordered until that cost study is done. So we have to be open-minded to what are the possibilities. And to say we only want X amount of units. We have to have retail. We have to have X amount of parking places and don't vary from that. Yeah, that's not going to happen. We've just found that out. So what do we do now? And so I think that, it's, as Laura said, we can have the study done, which I think is a good step in the right direction. We can work with the developer to come up with alternatives, but we can't just dig our feet in and say, this is what you told us we were going to get, so build it for us, because that's not going to happen. So, if wishes were horses, we could all take a ride, but they aren't, and we can't. So.
Scott?
Going back to my memory here from last week, and I think to Charlie's point that he made before, by the way, growing up in New England, you calling them spots warms my heart. My heart, I should say. The spots, and from what I understand, that the reconfiguration of the parking garage, because they have to now shift it. Sorry. The alleyways or the requires us to decrease the size of the stalls. Is that correct?
That was not my understanding. The orientation of State Street and Wilson Street are not parallel. Mm-hmm. And so what they did was they made them parallel, which is why a courtyard is created in front of those street level residential units on Wilson Street. And so it simply made the pathways through the parking lot symmetrical.
Okay. Fine. The fact is we do have a net loss, and that is exacerbated by the fact that we also have a gain in residents.
But we have a reduction in commercial, which is also
I
moves the equation the other way.
I understand that. I understand that. But given what we're looking to do, regardless of the commercial that's in there, we're looking to have 186 or 194 people make an impact downtown, and draw more people. So, to Marty's point, to Elliot's point, we're, and, to Mr. Patel's point last week, this is supposed to be a partnership. And, all of the change that has to happen on this seems to be on us. Now, he's got to make a change. He's got to add another bunch of units to it. Okay. He's going to be able to make his money that way. But we lose parking, and we lose retail. And granted, maybe the impact of the additional people may have a little bit more than what that retail is, but there is a cost to not having the retail, I think, on that side. I don't feel like this is being treated as a partnership. That's my feel. I feel like, this. I think it was Elliot that said, well, he could have gone in and reworked the architecture a little bit. Susan, you said that. You could have tried to add something, on the outside. Not put another level on it, but he could have reworked something. I didn't get the sense that he tried that hard to do that. So that my feel here, it's my feel, is that this has been done in such a way that everything, we're making the sacrifice, and the people are making the sacrifice.
But Scott, don't you think that he came
Susan.
to us in good faith?
Susan, we need to,
sorry.
you know,
I'm just asking Scott a question to expound on what he said, because I felt Dave came here and said, we can't build it for this, what do you want me to do?
He came here because we forced him to come here. He
No.
Okay, hold on.
Yes.
He came here
yes.
because we asked, what's going on with this project? And all of a sudden we find out once that was asked, oh yeah, we're $6 to $8 million over.
That, I completely disagree with that characterization of how this happened.
Well, we
He
heard-
contacted us about the shortfall, the excess in the costs, and he said, let's work on this together to see if we can find a solution to it. The $2 million additional in bonding that he would like us to take out on the project, and that will get repaid by the increments, as well as the compromises to the design, are certainly our part of this. But between that, the redesign and establishment of the enterprise zone, I believe solves only $4 million of the $6 to $8 million shortfall. So there is something more that they are going to have to do on their side. And he has always been willing to come here and explain what the design changes were. He had absolutely no problem with that.
But to Scott's point, Laura, we were hearing that there was a over budget issue and that there was a possibility that he'd be looking for more money from the city. And there was a possibility of this and a possibility of that. But it wasn't brought to head until we said, roughly 45 days ago, we want to know what's going on. So 30 days from now, within the next 30 days, have the developer prepared to come to us and tell us what it is that he needs to do to move this project forward. Because this project was supposed to be in the dirt by now. And it wasn't going anywhere other than a possibility of this and a possibility of that. So to Scott's point, that's when we said we need to see this happen within the next 30 days. And that's when Mr. Patzel from Shodine came in here. So I see where Scott is feeling, I feel the same way, that we had to say he needs to be here because this is going nowhere.
I offered for him to come to the next meeting and was told, no, please let us discuss it amongst ourselves before he comes in to present that. And I think that since he presented us with the problem of being over budget, he and his staff have been working on how to resolve that a number of different ways. And it wasn't until September 26th when they actually had something that was a plan for how to address those construction issues. I think they've been working with their architects.
Can I ask then, they've been working with their architect, and we, meaning staff, has been working with Shodine to try to make this work for quite some time. Has it been more than the dollars and cents of how we're going to try to make that work, or has our staff had knowledge of this retail and redesign for how long?
Since September 26th.
Well, the reason why I asked that is because these drawings, I woke up the other night after Dave was here, and I'm laying in bed thinking, there's something wrong with this picture. I just don't get it. There's something wrong. And so I thought to myself, architects always put dates on things. I wonder if they put a date on the drawing. So when I got up first thing in the morning, I looked at the drawing. There's dates on there, but you can't read it because it's been shrunk so much. So I took it to work and I blew it up. And I blew it up and I blew it up. Still can't read it. So I asked around the office, I said, anybody got a magnifying glass? Yeah. Took a magnifying glass. Really couldn't read it. Another guy said, I got one that jewelers use. So I put it on there. The first date on the drawing was for owner's review, April 24th, 2017. Second date was July something, I forget what it was, 2017, per owner's comments. So these drawings have been there for quite some time. We're wondering what's going on. I understand that they work with their architects, they work with their consultants, they work with their contractors to get bidding and everything else, but I don't have a warm, fuzzy feeling that, as Scott said, or I think Scott, partnership. That if we're in this partnership, as Dave referred to us numerous times, that we, the 14 of us here, haven't been a part of this partnership. So I just don't have a warm feeling about that. Beyond that, the whole process, I think, stinks. It behooves me how we can respect our process. And I know we can, because we can do basically anything we want, but how we can say, if we all agreed here tonight, let's go along with the plan that's been presented to us. Let's go along with the $2 million. Let's go along with the enterprise zone. Let's go along with all these changes, the retail, the parking, and everything else. But because we're going to go along with it, it needs to go back to Plan Commission. It needs to go back to Historic Preservation. Now, we all realize the issues that we had with Plan Commission and Historic Preservation. I think they did the best job they could under the conditions they had. But to send this back to Historic Preservation and Plan Commission, with now them knowing that we've been through this process, and we're now telling them, review it again, because this is what we want. We're not even affording them the opportunity to determine whether or not this is a good project. Because now we've put their feet to the fire, as they felt we did in approval of this process. We now have definitely put their feet to the fire by saying, we understand the changes, we're going to accept these changes, has to come back to you, so approve it. I don't like that process. It doesn't make sense to me at all. It really doesn't make sense. The money is the money. If we evaluate it and it works, it works. The retail, everybody's got differences of opinion on the retail. The parking, we all got differences of opinion on the parking. Residential, differences of opinion. As everybody here probably tonight, I struggled for the last week trying to figure this out. For some reason, it just came to me tonight that I'm not comfortable with this. And how can I get into a partnership if I'm not comfortable? So I value very much what we've done, and I value very much a development being put on that project. As the mayor has said, we need the income. We need to be looking at the future. And that brings me to my other thought process, because we do need to look at the future. You know, if this thing has to go on the back burner for a year or two to make the right 100-year decision, that's what it needs to do until we can feel comfortable. I've been here for 20-some years sitting over here, and there's been many of hard decisions I've had to make. Many of times have I said, this is the hardest vote I've ever had to make. But every time I've made it, I felt comfortable making it. I don't feel comfortable with this development any longer. I just don't.
Can I ask Mike a question too? Out of those 335 spots that are slotted right now, how many are promised as parking spots for Katrina's, Paul Graviscus?
For Katrina, none for Paul Graviscus. He preferred for his parking spaces to be an art stop, and there will be 200 overnight parking passes that will be available for the whether it's residences at 1 Washington Place or other residences in the downtown business district. So we already have, I don't know, a couple of dozen people who have overnight parking permits for the downtown area. But those we could tag those spots as reserved for the overnight parking permits.
Lucy?
I understand what you're saying, Dave. I guess I look at it a little differently. When Shodine said, well, we're a partner, I kind of thought, right, we're not partners here. That it is not a partnership. We have different goals. So I don't think that this transaction can be evaluated from my perspective on whether or not the partnership is really working. I am not, like you said, we all have different opinions. I think the downtown has struggled with parking for as long as I've lived here. And it's not just this particular area, but all over by Water Street, over by Houston Street. We're all struggling, and I think that's the Walgreens quadrant is struggling with parking. I don't think that we can expect this area to solve our downtown parking problems, which I kind of feel like we're trying to do. I think we need a comprehensive downtown parking plan. So that when I'm listening to all this, I'm thinking, all right, yeah, we don't want to lose parking spaces, but we don't have the parking study done yet, so we really don't know what we have. I still think that the goals of this project are being fulfilled with what we're being presented. We can't afford to build a parking deck without this project. And in order, from my perspective, from my background, I believe that the only way that retail is going to come downtown is if we have people living downtown and if we have rooftops.
Right.
And then the retail's coming. But we can't build retail down. For years we've heard retailers say, there's just not enough people walking by my door. I can't stay here. People aren't coming into town, and I'm not going to locate there unless we have more traffic. I'm going to go to Geneva, where there are people walking by along the street all the time. So the only way that we are going to get the type of retail that we hope, I think, that we want, because that's what surveys have told us, we need to have people down there. And right now, the downtown is kind of an island. It's hard for pedestrians to get down here, and we don't have a lot of people living down here. So I think we have to solve those problems if we want to have the retail. I can't imagine trying to lease those spaces along Wilson Street. I think they'd be constantly turning over. There's not good parking access, even if we build this big parking deck. I think that retail in those spaces along Wilson would be awkward. So I still think that our goals for this project would be met if we can feel that we will work with Shodine, but I don't think we can expect it to be a true partnership the way we're talking about it. And I think he just said that.
Well, the only thing I would disagree with you on, and the only thing I would disagree on is this. It goes further. We will be partners. This isn't just we're partners until the tenants move in and all of our obligations are met. Because his tenants are going to be sharing our parking spaces that we are owning and occupying and maintaining. Mm-hmm. The elevators are going to be shared by his tenants and our people and anybody that uses the parking garages. The maintenance of the building. There's a lot of partnership agreements that have to be worked out on all this stuff. So whoever the owner of that building will be, ultimately, it may not be him. He could turn around and sell it before it's even built. We're partners.
All right.
Susan?
Dave, this is a question directed at you, and it probably expands further than you. Have you lost confidence in this project? Have you lost confidence in Shodine as the builder of a project? Because I think we need to, if we want to say to Shodine, great, this has been fun, thanks for the last 3 years, see ya, we need to make that decision and move on. I don't think it's fair to any party to just keep, stringing it out longer. So, we've got to give some direction to staff. And if the lack of confidence goes to the builder, then we're done. Or should we have the study? Or should we have Shodine give us some additional alternatives? Those were the 3 choices Laura gave us. And I don't hear that we're any further closer to a decision.
So I guess if I had to be honest with you, which I will be.
Thank you.
I have lost confidence in the process and the builder that we're working with. I do believe that the project could be a great project, and I do believe that we need this type of project. But I don't like the way it's gone. I don't feel comfortable with the way it's gone. And I don't feel comfortable with the way it would have to proceed if we continue on this track.
Dave.
Dan?
The language that we are using is so reminiscent of trying to save a marriage that has been broken for a long, long time. It just feels like we're making excuses for why we're still in love, when we met, what our first song was. And the funny thing about nostalgia is it is a liar. And you look back and I don't see the person I fell in love with. I get that. When he came here to tell us about this project, he spoke with such, it wasn't as bad of a plan as I thought it was going to be. I missed the things that I fell in love with. I liked the retail part, and I was so angry when I heard that was gone. That was a deal breaker for me. I'm done. We're breaking up. But when I saw the plan, I'm like, this is kind of cool. I can deal with this. It's Ukrainian Village. I like that. And then I thought over this week, okay, well, how do we fix this building? It's like a letter E. What if we raise that E up one floor and put the retail on Washington? And then I'm thinking, well, now I'm just trying to change this person. We need to break up. Let's start over. There's someone out there for us. And I don't think that Shodin is who we're supposed to be with. I honestly, it breaks my heart. But I agree with you.
Alan?
I'm sitting back here listening to this, and I like Marty's analogy of the car, and I think it's not more of a car but a truck. We wanted this to make money for us, and the truck wasn't big enough to make the money that we needed to be able to pay for the truck, being the parking garage located within this. And the only way to do that, to get the parking garage that we wanted, even if it wasn't everything that we wanted, was to get a bigger truck. And I think that's the reality. We want something out of this, and the only way to pay for it is to give up something that we wanted as part of it. And if we're not willing to do that, we are done. And as far as the parking problems that everybody keeps trying to bring up down here, I have an interesting observation that I made last night. We had at least 200 people here the last several weeks. And again, last night I thought about it as I tried to find a parking place to park down here, that everybody made it in here from another town or other towns, and they all found a place to park last night. And they all found a place to park the last 2 times they were here. And I didn't see cars out in the street. I didn't see people driving around in circles looking for places to park. They all found a place to park probably within 15 minutes of when the meeting started. So when we say we have a parking problem, it's a perception problem. If you can't find a parking place in front of where you want to go, it's a parking problem. And that's what people's perception is. When you want to go to something, like the meeting that people wanted to come here and complain or whatever they wanted to say when they got here, they found a place to park. So I don't believe we truly have the parking problem that everybody keeps complaining about and saying. There are parking spaces all over this downtown, and the art stop gets used. People park on this side of the river and they walk across the bridge and they go to restaurants on the east side. There are many places to park in this downtown, and people use them all the time.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but there's something called parking friction. And when people really want to come to the meeting, they're going to come. But if you have a little gift store downtown, or a certain type of a grocery store, if parking is difficult, people are just going to kind of go by. So, there's different types of parking. So I don't know that I don't know that retailers would
Right.
fully
I was going to say
agree.
it will affect retailers more than anything because, again, I want to park in
And
front of
that's
the
what
store
we're
and want to
talking
shop.
about. That's the concern, is retailers. I think they're the ones that can't have a lot of parking friction.
But Lucy, if we build a parking deck and a retail's a block away, they're still a block away.
Well, and that's why I
There's
don't.
plenty of parking. I believe, to Alan's point, there's plenty of parking in our downtown. It's just a block a block and a half away, and so you have to walk a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, when
I
Al
guess we
Tamanu
just
came
have
here,
to convince the
when Al
retailers.
Tamanu came here, they had a whole visual that showed all the hardscapes. I mean, there was parking. I mean, some of the parking might have to be, we go to the banks that are not being used, their parking, and say, hey, at night, we'll whatever the insurance is on that, we can work out a deal with them.
Well, and yet
Because the
that's
insurance
part of
has to be minimal. Okay? So I think we can solve some of the parking problems. Not that we don't need a parking deck. Okay? But I think we can work that out, so. And with the parking deck, again, people are going to have to walk. That's just life.
Well, and I think we have to remember that.
You got more?
Yes, absolutely.
We let Mike finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, on to 1 Washington Place. You know, I have just a couple of comments, a couple of issues that I'm trying to wrap my head around. I mean, when Dave Patzelt spoke to us 2 years ago, whatever it was, pretty knowledgeable guy. I mean, they've done this before, you know, it's not nothing new to them. And he came last week and spoke, and pretty knowledgeable guy again. He was somewhat inflexible, and you know, he made his apology. As I said, I thought it was somewhat cavalier because it really was, it rang hollow. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, I messed up. Too bad. And it kind of is too bad. It's a shame. I was a strong advocate. I thought this was an economic engine for our downtown. And it possibly still can be. I mean, with as it was said, you know, if we build it and we don't have the retail in it, you know, it may generate more retail a block away. We do have storefronts that I believe can house retail. But again, back to Patzelt. I mean, there's a couple of things with that. His gulf of $2 million, from $6 to $8 million, is considerable. That's a lot of money. And he can't bring it any tighter. We're picking up $2 million of either the 6 or the 8, and he's going to pick up 4 or 6 million. And I know it's open book. He's saying that we can look at all his records, but the city of Batavia, I said before, you know, we had a bloodletting here, picking up properties, and people came here and told us, you know, how dare you spend our money this way? And we thought this is the best thing, this economic engine for our downtown. We did it. And he just kind of is now dismissing it. I just have some concerns with that. I'm just trying to get more of my thoughts together. But with that economic engine, I just lost my thought. I apologize. But I'll say this again. I have other thoughts on it. Is this could have been a successful project. It still possibly can be a successful project for us. I don't want to get caught up in it not having the full 15,000 square feet of retail, and I'm cutting out 9,000 square feet of retail. I don't want to get lost in that. I don't want to get lost in losing 9 parking spaces to 15 parking spaces. It's still a considerable project. But I think with all this that's happened, we now have a piece of land that is virtually turnkey for development. And to Nick's point, let's do it right the one time. Nick said it last week, and it hit home to me. You know, I think this could still be a positive thing for our city, but it might not be the right thing. And the right thing might just be around the corner if we're patient. Not that we want to be too patient, but something, because now it's turnkey, so maybe another developer might come in and say, hey, this is ideal. Riverview, exactly what I'm looking for. And we could have a very good project. My concern with that is being, you know, we do have the SSA. And so our residents, we will not lose any money on this. You know, it's all guaranteed payback. We might not get that again with anyone else coming down the pike. So that's a concern I have. I really don't know which way I'm going, although again, back to my point, these guys have done this, and they missed it by $6 to $8 million. I just keep thinking, how could you miss it by that much money? And again, we put skin in this game. We put in, $1.5 million, whatever the amount is, plus the time put in by staff. I mean, there's a ton of time by staff. They didn't come to 10% of what we put in buying into the project. So it's easy for the developer to say, well, if you don't like it, I guess I'll just leave. It was nice doing business with you, because he doesn't have the skin in it that we do. And that's upsetting to me, that they wouldn't even buy into the project with investing another $75,000, $80,000 for a set of plans, workable plans, 60, 75% complete plans that then you can give a hard number to. I mean, they're still pulling numbers out that are just space fillers. They're not real budget numbers. And that's why I'm thinking, where'd you get $6 or $8 million? I don't trust the numbers. He said he got numbers from 2 other contractors. Well, I know who the contractors are, reputable companies, but they had no plans to bid it, so it's X amount of dollars. Does that fill your bill? They didn't buy into the project. The developer did not buy into this project. And because of that, I'm very hesitant to do business with them now. And I guess that's the bottom line. I don't know yet how I'm going to vote on this, but I just have a lot of reservations moving forward with them because of this. They were not forthright enough. So that's.
We are beyond the point of what you were just saying with picking out, agreeing or disagreeing on the number of spaces, whether or not there's retail or not. We would be having a vote, not on the up or down on the merits of the project, but a no confidence vote in it. Which what you're talking about with where did the $6 to $7, $8 million come from? The information that you just told me, Dave, is, to Dan's analogy, we just caught somebody doing something. You caught your spouse doing something you're not even supposed to. You've gone to the very foundational tenets of the trust in the relationship. So when we're taking a vote now as to whether or not the project, kind of even just the great analogy with the marriage, but it's so serious. I can't ever imagine that we would take a vote and it's not yes or no on the project, but I have no trust in this, which then undermines the foundational bedrock of everything that we're supposed to be standing for. The process is, if we lose faith in that process and we're taken advantage of in that, that's irreparable.
May I just ask, because I'm ignorant of the process of architectural drawings, can you tell me what the dates on those architectural drawings, what the conclusions are that you're drawing from those dates?
On these drawings here that we were.
Yeah, you were saying that you blew up the dates,
Yeah.
and the first date was
Yeah.
April of
April.
2016?
2017.
2017.
Yeah. So my thinking on that is he's known for quite some time that this doesn't look like this is going to be a project that's going to work with the dollars that have been talked about. So he went back to his architect and he said, we got to make some changes because it's coming in over budget. I've talked to my steel contractor, I've talked to this guy, and this is how much I think it's going to cost the way it's drawn up. So they drew up some drawings and presented them to him on the date of April, whatever. They looked at them, and they probably, the way I understand the way the construction industry works, is they looked at them and they said, interesting. Okay, let's spend some time, just like the city would, staff level, evaluating, what are we going to do with this? They did. They got back with their architect. They said, this is what we think. Architect said, and I don't know this for a fact, but architect said, okay, good ideas. Let me do another drawing for you, conceptual. They did. It's got the date of 7 something on it. They went back to the developer. Developer said, okay, this seems like this is something that maybe we can work with. Let me go back into the budget area of it and see what we can do with, how we think this cost will come in. And that's probably where they came up with a more definitive $6 to $8 million. And losing of retail and adding of residential to make it all work. So that probably occurred over the next month of the date of that drawing. So now you're into the month of 8. So you're not that far off into the dates of how the whole thing came down. But to everybody else's point, he's a builder / developer. How did we get this far into this project before we realized we were $6 to $8 million, and we still can't get closer than $6 to $8 million over budget?
Okay, thanks.
When did we start hearing about the precast concrete issue? Or, that happened several months.
I'll tell you how that happened, what I know. I can only tell you what I know. Mr. Patso called me up one day, and he said, I'm in the concrete business. And he said, Dave, would you be interested in bidding this project for me? And I said, no, I don't think that would be something that I should do. And he said, well, could I send the drawings over to you for you to take a look at and consider it? I said, I'd love to see the drawings. Why wouldn't I want to see the drawings? So I think there was a total of, I should have brought them with me because I've got a copy of them. I think there were a total of 37 pages of very, very conceptual drawings. The drawings for the apartment area were pretty detailed, enough to bid off of, but the foundation area was napkins, I guess you could say. So I called him back and I said, Dave, I said, got these drawings, looked at them. I said, I'm not going to bid it. I don't belong in that area, bidding a project that I'm approving or not approving. But as far as I'm concerned, what you've got drawn here, it's a cast-in-place foundation and cast-in-place parking deck. I said, this is screaming precast. I said, I'm working on 4 other projects right now that are precast parking garages. This project is screaming precast. There's got to be a huge cost savings here for you if you go precast. His answer was, appreciate that. And to his benefit, he says, but, I'm very concerned about point loads, constructability of it. And he said, I don't want to build something that isn't going to last and not have problems with for a very, very long time. Appreciate that. I said, but yet you can get that with precast. And he said, I'm just not real familiar with precast. Don't know much about it, but thanks for your input. That was the last conversation I had with them. I then understand through, I think, Laura, that they did discuss it in a staff meeting that they had with them. And Mr. Patso brought up that he talked to me and that I said it's just screaming precast, so he was going to explore that.
Okay.
And from my understanding, he has explored it, and he sees a potential of $350,000 savings, maybe?
No, I think that they said it cannot be done in precast after meeting with the consultant that we had hired to oversee the parking garage construction. We said, feel free to ask them to provide you with advice. And they said, no, it is $35,000 to $38,000 per space because it can't be done with the precast. And then the precast also, because it's the T
It's the
shape,
double T
adds to
where
the
it
height, the double
drops
T.
down.
It can be done, but there would have to be some altercations, just as Dave mentioned, that he doesn't know yet because he's still working with the precast to what that height difference would be. So again, many different stories. Elliot?
If I can, because I was at that meeting, and Gary was.
Use the mic, please.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was at that. Yeah, I attended that meeting on, I believe it was a Thursday afternoon at Carl Walker. And the focus of the meeting was, in fact, can this be done in a precast? And Dave Petzelt was there, Rahat was there, Gary was there, I was there, a representative from Carl Walker was there, and Shodine's engineering consultant was on the phone. And it was talked about quite a bit, and there were a lot of technical issues. You mentioned them, with respect to should it be, pre-stressed versus non, and can we use this type of decking, and what are the spans we can go with, and a lot of stuff was beyond me. But what I did catch for sure was it may be close to a wash, but you're going to have to build the building higher, and like 4 feet between the floors. So that, I'm not saying that was a deal killer, but it sounded like they weren't going to save any money and they had to build the building higher than what had been proposed. I think that was the rationale behind, well, it's probably not going to work. Also, there was some discussion about how they would condition the upper level of the floor, of the garage floor. I think they mentioned pelham space between the roof line and the floor, but that was more or with respect to the condition of that space and those costs. But yeah, it was discussed at length, and I think Gary, at any rate, walked out satisfied that there wasn't going to be any real savings with the precast methodology because of the additional costs associated with the spans again and this double T type structure. You know more than I do, but so I'm not sure he's completely dropped it. He mentioned last week that they're still looking at it. So, I think that the point is that when someone mentions how they're shrinking the delta between what they thought the original cost was, it's not just throwing more money at it, it's also trying to reduce some of the cost of constructing it. And as we talked about, the big part was trying to get the level floor and not have to dig so deep, which is the real principal reason. Certainly he thinks he'd have a hard time renting the retail space on Wilson, but the real principal reason behind that is because to construct the higher ceilings for a sufficient retail space requires him to go further into the bedrock. So that was the cost savings by changing it to apartments there.
Dave?
Let's keep going this way. Mark?
The retail, Wilson again, I'll go back to that. So everybody seems very married to, or Dave seems very married to this plan. He's willing to go back in front of everybody, go back through the entire process because of the changes that he's doing here. Like I said, you look at a creative design that, somebody did on a napkin. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And it just gets me thinking, it's like, why not change the building that on Wilson, if it were walk-ups with retail on the first floor, like was there before, granted insurance buildings and things like that, those are successful. That's what we have. So separate that out from the rest of the building. Do something creative. Then he doesn't have to worry about digging deeper because then every building along Wilson is a separate building. Okay, solves that problem. Then we go back and it would actually reduce the number of residents because I don't think you're going to do like a 4-story walk-up or something like that. But you have the ability to do things a little differently. If he's going to go back through the process, then he should be creative. If we're going to go and throw it out to other people are going to be creative. Is how much does he really want to build in Batavia? Why do we have to stick with the exact thing that we have here? Go back to the drawing board if he really wants to do something. If he doesn't want to do anything and he's willing to walk away, then he can walk away and somebody else will come in and be creative and do something that's going to satisfy what we want. People are saying, didn't necessarily need the retail and that's not going to drive anything. That's what you guys voted on. I wasn't here, but that's what you guys voted on. You all said, nope, this is what we want. And now it's like, maybe not. So if it was me and I had voted on the retail, I would vote no on this because that's what I would have agreed to.
Nick?
I worked all week at trying to just use logic and not the comfort level and all of that. But I'm glad to hear everyone else felt what I was feeling. But I worked all week. I wanted to make this decision based on logic and facts and what's right and what we wanted. And, there's 3 basic changes, and the retail is one of them. And I agree, that was something we can justify that it makes sense without it. We can justify that it might even be better or whatnot. But I wanted this as an economic engine. That's how I justified the TIF, which is another thing. The $2 million, we can justify that it pays for itself. But there's a cost to TIF. And we're not getting anything more for that $2 million. And that is 2 million more taken away from every other taxing body, which will eventually come back to us. I'm all for TIF if it's for the right investment, but there is a cost to it. It's not just free money. And then the parking. I mean, I'm going to spoil the suspense. The parking study will come back that it'll be a net wash, or maybe even a net gain. I'll tell you that right now. That's what's going to happen. But we all know that's not the case. We're losing spots, and we can't afford it. And the thing that really scares me about it is we've got this great spot at the Larson Becker that if we're short parking spots, that's going to stay a parking lot. And that would be a bigger sin than building this or not doing it or anything, is to leave that a parking spot. So whatever the justification comes back, I won't support this or these changes. I know that's my vote. And all those justifications won't sway me on that. So your first vote, I was a big advocate for this, and I know people coming down, we need it. We need people in downtown. There will be other developers, and we got this other property as well. So good things are coming, I know that, but this isn't one of them. So I would go, this is our project that we said, you either do it or don't, and we go back to the drawing board.
Drew, you have anything?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. For me, the biggest value in this project for us was the downtown density and the parking garage. Those two elements remain. There's, pick your poison on plus or minus X spots, but the fact is the parking garage is still there and the density is still there. It's a bummer to lose the little bit of retail space on Wilson Street. And Wilson is definitely our most visible commercial retail corridor, but there's another one that's developing, and we hope it keeps developing, which is River Street going north. And we've got grand plans for what might happen going that direction. And Nick's worried about the Larson Becker parking lot staying a parking lot if we need spaces. I'm worried about it staying a parking lot if we don't have the density to drive somebody to develop it. And we're creative people, we're smart. There's other properties that aren't right on the river that are near there, and we can creatively find more parking downtown. Ellen said we've got lots of parking. We do have lots of parking if you're willing to walk a little bit. This project's been, from start to finish, it's been, wait, one more thing, no matter what we were doing, whether it was property acquisitions, early stages of the development, it's every step of the way. It's been 15, wait, there's just one more thing. And it's fatiguing. I get it. I'm worn out on it. And I think a lot of you are probably worn out on it too. And I'm worried some of that, this has been so many one more things wearing us out that we're just done and looking for a good reason to be done rather than go forward with what's likely going to be another painful round of plan commission development review, all the bits and parts. We're going to get all the emails again. We're going to get phone calls. There's going to be all of that. And yeah, it's work. It's fatiguing. It's hard to do. It takes up time. And there may be another opportunity coming down the pike. It may come tomorrow. It may not come for 5, 6, 7 years. And then the TIF is that much shorter, and we're that much more constrained by what we can do because we've got that much less time to pay off the TIF. So, yeah, this isn't perfect. There's heebie-jeebies, but based on some of the discussion I've heard tonight around feelings about Shodine, this project, whatever, I find it hard to believe that those guys ever got a project built anywhere. Yet, we see their projects, they're successful, they're all over the Fox Valley. I don't know how they've done that if everything is always as wrong as it is with this one. This one, I don't know. And Dave, to your point about going back to the Plan Commission, I completely hear that. It seems roundabout and backwards for it to go back to them with us saying, yeah, this is what we want. I don't know another way around it. If I did, I'd speak up and talk about it, but I don't know there's another way around it. And I don't know I want to see this opportunity go away because there's something that's hard that has to get done, or getting something done is going to be hard. So I'm not excited about it, but I certainly am not willing to let it die at this point either. I think that little bit of retail we're gonna lose is such small potatoes in the long term of what getting some real needed density into the downtown is going to bring. It's going to be the engine for across the street in the gas station parking lot. It's going to be the engine that powers River Street to the north. It's going to raise rents on Wilson Street. I mean, that's the kind of engine that this is going to be. And we wait, maybe we get another project and it comes in, it's got no parking garage. Fine. It could be townhomes. There was a bunch of townhomes proposed for there at one point with a little bit of retail. That's not the density we need in the downtown to, I think, pursue the vision we'd like to pursue. So I'm wary of making a mistake because we're worn out.
Tony, you have anything?
Yeah, I'm obviously not as invested in this, the amount of time that you guys have all put into this. I will say I do feel uneasy about it. Right when I heard that, figure of $6-8 million caught my attention. I totally agree, and as you guys work through this project, and I fully support it, I think the downtown density is key. And if there were no changes, I would fully support. But the idea of coming back, oh, we made a mistake, and it's a big mistake. And it just doesn't feel right. It feels like, I don't know. I don't know because I haven't worked with, this developer specifically on this project, but, I've done projects myself, and a significant mistake like that, or underestimate of necessarily mistake, makes for going into a project like this not the most ideal. So and hearing tonight that I'm not the only one feeling uneasy. It's a big red flag for me.
Like,
what Drew just said is I agree with you, Drew. I agree. I think this can still be an economic engine. I mean, to get things moving for us. I guess my real true concern is he's going to come back again, or one more thing, or I missed something else. and we're just going to keep dragging it forever on. That's my concern. If he can just say, I'm done. I mean, and it's costing us more money, absolutely. But you know, it's just trying to think, not for this year and for next year, but they do build good buildings, and for just future years down the road, this could be a good thing for our city. And who knows what the future brings if we let it go. But I tried to get it out of him the last meeting, like, so we're done, right? No more changes, no more what ifs, and he couldn't assure me that, so I still don't know what to do.
Alan, you still?
Yeah, I've thought a little bit more about it. You know, I do feel like Drew does that, you know, this is an opportunity for us, even with the flaws that it has, to bring people downtown. And I think we shouldn't kid ourselves that we're going to say no to this and somebody else is going to come in and propose something for that site. We're still going to have to give basically the same thing, even though it'll be less money because it'll be later on throughout the TIF. We're still going to have to give a lot of money towards that from the TIF to be able to get something we want out of it, whether it's retail or whether it's parking, you know, however we want to do that, that's going to still be part of the equation. I mean, that's something I think we all have to agree on, that we can't be hung up on the dollars that we're putting into this because it's being created by what's being built there. And if we don't like this, we don't like the developer, we don't like whatever we don't like about it, and we don't do it, we're still going to have to be in the same position, basically giving it away to get something built there at some point. We have the investment already in the property. Yes, it's a cleaner site than it was before, but it's still the same thing. To be able to get any kind of parking density in that property, you're going to have to build vertical. And you're going to have to put a lot of units in there to get that back. And if we get to that point where it's 5 years from now and we have to do this, the only way feasibly that you'd get those 300 or 350 parking spaces on there probably is going to be 6 stories, which will never fly in this town. So that's going to be the hardest thing for me to get beyond that. I mean, what really bothered me the other night with Dave Patzel standing up there was when I asked him, okay, we're going to give you $2 more million out of this. We're going to bond out for that. I know you're the one that's going to create it, but what are you giving us? What are you putting back into this? And if he would have stand up there and told me, you know what, we cut 0.5%, even if it was 0.5% out of their profit, that would have, to me, said partnership. That would have said they're giving back into this. And I would have voted yes for it right then and there. But when he stood up there and said basically nothing in his roundabout way, that really threw up the red flag for me that I'm not really sure where I'm going on it.
Susan?
Listening to everyone, and I fully agree with Drew and Mike for once. No, I'm kidding, Mike. I think that we reach a point where you have to make a decision. Are we going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to use an old expression, and, you know, just say, okay, and watch the TIF clock ticking, hoping that someone will come along with something better? I watch projects being built up and down the Fox Valley, the new townhomes going into Geneva, the very expensive townhomes that were just built in Geneva that there's only 4 left on Route 31. And developers have not come to Batavia with those types of plans. And so we look at this and say, okay, while it might not be a true partnership because they're for profit and we are not, it's partnership, and that we're getting what we need in terms of a parking structure, and they're getting what they need in terms of a profitable building. So, you know, I look at this and say, are you just, when you say you've lost confidence with the developer, is it because you're just sick of this? Because there have been so many twists and turns on our side as well as theirs. The property acquisition they didn't have anything to do with. We had a lot of problems for a very long time with that part of it. And, you know, the developer waited and cooled his heels while we were trying to decide what to do for a very, very long time. So now we're putting it all back on him and saying, yeah, you know what, we just don't think we like you anymore, you know? And I don't think that that's fair. I think that that's not fair to Shodine. I mean, I look at the quality of his product in other towns around us, and to call him out on, you know, not having confidence as a builder doesn't excite me. The other thing that an alderman in another town brought up to me as they were working through residential construction is, and he's in the trades, and he said he expects to see the price of things skyrocket because of all the devastation and hurricanes in the Caribbean. And he saw this after Katrina and saw the price of copper go up, saw the price of drywall go up, saw the price of everything go up. So the longer we wait, the more we pay. And again, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I agree with Drew. I agree with Mike.
Lucy?
I agree also with Drew, Mike, and Susan. My concern is, I mean, there aren't a lot of there's a limited market of developers that are capable of doing a project like this. Shodine is unique, and like Susan said, there are not a lot of developers coming to town. And Chris, so I guess I'd like you to maybe give us an idea of how many people are out there that would be capable of doing a project like this, that we would have access to.
Well, there are not many. I mean, that's
the market's small.
My experience for a project of this magnitude. You know, they have equity obviously in the project, but they can go out and negotiate pretty good lending rates because they have so much collateral, you know, around the Fox Valley that they can get fairly decent rates for lending. That puts them in an advantaged position. You know, I was talking to Laura today about Marquette, you know, the Marquette company that bought the property, the Citron property up in Geneva. Well, they've come back. I live within 1,000 feet, so I got the material in my mailbox, and they really reduced the project down. They really responded to what the neighbors wanted, and frankly, we're to some extent really reduced the density in overall number of units. A lot of it's single-family homes now, but guess what? They own that land. I mean, they're in a situation where like, geez, we're all in. You know, we got to build something. Every day we got carry cost on this property. We got to build something. You know, we're in a redevelopment agreement, but we haven't transferred the land to the developer because at that point, that means he's got to build the project. And at this point, we can walk away because this proposal is not consistent with the entitlements that were granted under the PUD, and that ends the project, or he can walk away because he can't build what the city wants there. And, you know, he's a big boy. They'll eat their whatever 100,000 plus they have into it, and he claims it's a lot more than that, but I'm not going to argue with what they spent. I know what the city has spent, and that's considerable amount of money and time. So, I mean, believe me, if the developer is being told that this is not happening, the sooner they find out, the better off we all are. I think that was stated earlier. They're prepared to finish the drawings and go through the process all over again, but they're not going to create more drawings and more time and expense if they don't feel that there's ultimately, I mean, they know the Plan Commission probably would be against it. They were against the first proposal, and this is less consistent with the land use objectives that were stated with the Plan Commission. So they're likely not going to get that favorable vote under the current plan, the revision. But they're willing to go through that process and spend additional money to get the entitlement. But they won't do it if they don't feel that the council is willing to accept it. And if that's the case, then we tell them and we try to find somebody else as soon as possible. But to answer your question, there aren't a lot of people. I mean, you can say it's more development ready because the buildings are gone and we've acquired the land. But I wrote with Jason that RFQ that went out in December of 2013, and it says in it, the city will acquire the necessary properties to build the project. So that wasn't, the fact that we have the properties now, yeah, it's more of a certainty, but the RFQ did say we will get that. So I don't know how much more development ready it is. I think probably the market's gotten better. I think the real problem with the RFQ going out in 2013 is that nobody was building anything. But now we're seeing building happening elsewhere in the periphery. Which incidentally, there's an awful lot of project proposals that staff looks at on a regular basis for a long time that go through a lot of iterations that you never hear about, really, not in any real detail, because they don't have to, and it's not ripe for your consideration. In this particular project, you found out very early on what this project would look like because that was part of the PUD process. There had to be plans associated with the entitlement, and the project wasn't going to move forward if they weren't going to have a redevelopment agreement, because it was predicated on the TIF. So you did find out plans early on, and now much time has passed and the plans have changed. But the process about the change in plans is not that unusual in any development scenario. It happens all the time. You're just not privy to the early discussions because there's no point, and nor does a developer want to get public with that so soon. They're still hashing out the numbers, it's going through review. So this process was different, and unfortunately, the laundry had to be hung out there right away. And they screwed up. They got the wrong numbers, and they're now wanting to hang different laundry. And I agree with everything that's been said about how difficult and hard the project has been to get where we are now, and maybe we're not anywhere.
Mayor, you have any comments?
I've been sitting here listening to this conversation, and you know, I guess I'm not, is this on? Yes. I guess I'm not surprised by what I've heard. As I sat here, I began to reflect about sitting it wasn't in this room, we were next door here in the parking lot when I was first elected mayor in 1981, 37 years ago, and I'm the only one in this room right now that was here 37 years ago as a public official. But we used to have the council chambers next door in a one-story building that was later tore down, and as you were having meetings, rats would literally run across the floor in front of you. That's the kind of the atmosphere, and the roof leaked when it rained. So we had buckets sitting all over, and we had rats running through the floor. So we were pretty austere in those days, but we were trying to get some stuff going. And I will tell you that in 1981, two of the greatest controversies of this town was, number one, should the city of Batavia join Kane County in buying the railroad right-of-ways that went through our downtown and build a bicycle network? And you never, well, you've seen a lot of hellfire and damnation from people who don't like something. Well, we started that in 1981 because, let me tell you, there was all kinds of people down here wanting to object to the Batavia participating in building a bicycle trail, which was said nobody would use. It would be a haven for drug dealers and burglars, and it would be a massive decrease in property values if we allowed this bike trail to get built in our downtown. The next thing that happened is that we had a similar situation going right up here at the north end of the island because Lutheran Social Services of Illinois was trying to build this thing that they were going to call River Rain, which was going to be a 90-unit senior citizen thing. Once again, this was all bad news for a lot of people. It was going to take away what they perceived was going to be park space. It was going to bring a lower income criminal element into the community who would run around the downtown shoplifting. And it was just all these terrible things were going to happen. At the end of the day, we agreed to both of them. And, obviously now we have the beautiful situation where on some weekends, CMAP tells me that they come out here and count, and starting on Friday afternoon through Sunday night, there's 5,000 bicycle riders or joggers or walkers using our bike trails. It's become one of the greatest anchors of downtown Batavia. Same is true with River Rain. I can think of countless old Batavians who are no longer with us that were able to move in there and live out their lives in great dignity because that place was there and they could live there. Again, River Rain and the bike trail were both built with massive opposition to it. You want to talk about other things that had massive opposition. Rebuilding Bellevue Place on South Jefferson Street went through 3 different developers before we finally got what was going. Part of it was built and it was stopped. The building fell into the Resolution Trust at the federal government, and we had to extract it out of that. So this coming of building things and things not working out right away, we're really used to doing that in this town. Probably one of the greatest fights was when the decision was made to buy the old high school and tear that down and build the new library. And we had people crying in the streets and throwing things at the demolition crews, and this was going to be the ruination of downtown because we were going to take all this land and make it into a non-tax producing property. Well, you know, you can say what you want about it, but now we have, the library tells me, between 850 and 1,000 people a day going in that library, and it's become another major anchor tenant. So all this stuff all had, you know, everything I've seen in this in Campana, this is all not new to me. I've heard of all these opposition people before, and some are right and some are wrong. Now, on the other side of it, we had a developer that wanted to go up here right to the north of our building in about 1988. I think his name was James Fowlsby, and he was from Lake Forest, and he wanted to tear down what is today the police garage, and he wanted to tear down the rest of the buildings here, which we subsequently tore down anyway, and he wanted to build a condo that overlooked the Fox River, both from the pond and from the river, and so it was going to be right next to River Rain coming up. And again, that one was highly controversial, and at the end of the day, just kind of like the conversation you just had, the city council made a decision, we're going to drop this, there's just too many missing parts, and he wants to talk about adding cost and all this good stuff. So that one went away, but after that one went away, up rose the Batavia Riverwalk idea, and we took all that land and we kept the police garage, we redid that, and you know, we now have a police department that I think is fairly functionable, and we're not looking at going out and spending $15 to $20 million to build a new police station someplace. And we've built the Riverwalk, which is annually enjoyed by thousands of residents on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to share this little pep talk with you because, you know, despite how horror or disappointed some may be or some may not be, at the end of the day, there's a history here that things do work out. Now, in this particular project, one thing I will say is it has been a real bloodletting exercise. I will friendly describe it as that, because we've had to buy all this land. Now, we've spent a lot of money, and we've got a major investment sitting there that we need to make sure that we capitalize our, our investment on. I would suggest that, you know, something will happen. We will get something good. But I will tell you, I'm sitting here in this coat and tie because I've been in the region today at various meetings, and this message about how bad the state of Illinois is and how flat broke they are and how terrible the finances is really picking up speed. There is a lot of conversation about the horrors of what we're going to hear in this 14-month year that they've now invented to distribute. The local government distributing fund is costing all the cities in the state about 10% of their money. So I want to just share with you that I think whatever we're going to do here in the next couple of years, we got to be very cautious about what it is we're doing and that we don't put too much of it anymore on the taxpayers' backs, because I think we don't have a lot of good guarantee or faith that there's going to be a lot of new money coming at us from specifically the state level and probably from the federal level, because we got to be real cautious about what we're doing here. So, you know, this is one of these, you take the good with the bad. Obviously, there has been some bad things happen here that shouldn't have happened, and, you know, you have to sit here and kind of soul search and make your decision as to what it is you want to do. But at the end of the day, you know, I think there will be a bright sunshine on it at some point in time. I want to finalize this by saying that despite what we are saying tonight and what we've done, the Shodine Company has been a friend to the city of Batavia during my administration. And I say that specifically for some of the things that have happened. Specifically, in the early 1980s, we were informed by the federal government that our water system had a terrible radium problem, and it was way out of whack, and that we potentially, serving the water we then had, we could be causing cancer in some of our residents. So obviously, we all hit the panic on that. And we brought in experts, and they came in with a solution for us. And that solution is that we had to mix the shallow water with the deep water. And lo and behold, right to the west of Batavia on Wenmouth Road was this aquifer that was all shallow water. But it was owned by Mr. Shodine. And Mr. Shodine ended up selling that land to the city of Batavia we got an independent appraiser to come in and appraise it. And Shodine agreed to sell us what that independent appraisal said it was. He didn't pay for the appraiser, but he agreed to the price. And the only thing he asked for was he was going to build Mill Creek subdivision, and he wanted to have the ability that he could hook onto our water system, so if anything ever happened to his out there, he could call us, we would go over there and open up a valve, and we could supply them with water for a couple of days if they needed it. And he wanted to have that backup in his water and sewer system. So we agreed to that. So, I mean, that was a real sweetheart deal, and he didn't need to do that for us, but he did. So, you know, he has been a very friendly supporter. The other thing I would share with you is that by building Mill Creek subdivision out here, one of the things he did, and I don't think he did as a favor to Batavia, but he made that whole thing basically a residential operation. Very, very little in real retail. So now you've got 1,954 houses sitting out there, and every time one of those residents needs a service, a tank of gas, a grocery shopping spree, buy a shirt, where they got to go is into Randall Road and spend their sales tax in Batavia or Geneva or St. Charles. And, you know, it's like having a whole town sitting out there that you don't have to pay for that's coming into our town and spending all their money. So Chaudine's done some stuff that really has been very beneficial to the Tri-Cities, but particularly Batavia. And he's been, in my experience, a very honorable gentleman to deal with, as has Mr. Patso. They, you know, obviously we got ourselves into this situation, and I think they understand what's happened, and we can go on. But there's just a history lesson here that, you know, it may appear to be a dark moment, but we do need to, I think that something good will happen. I would suggest, however, that whatever's going to happen on any of this property, wherever it is we may need to do it, is I subscribe to what Alderman McFadden has been preaching to us the last few weeks about the need for increasing our assessed valuation as a community, because what I'm seeing financially from the state specifically, we need to have some density here that we can tax, and that the school district and the city and everybody else can maybe pay off some TIF, but at the end of the day, and the one thing that was good in my opinion about the Chaudine development, however it was going to be, was it was going to generate apparently between $800 and $1 million a year in taxes. And once you got the TIF paid off, that would be a real shot in the arm to the school district and the city government and town and all the other governments. So we need to make some of those, I would describe them as investment development decisions, where at the end of the day we get a pretty nice pot of money in our hands, and we do have some opportunities in the community to do that. I would suggest there's going to be a real run for housing like Mr. Chaudine is talking about, specifically in 2020 when the Fermilab begins construction of the neutron accelerator, because they're supposedly bringing about 1,800 people in here to do work for about 5 or 6 years, and then they're going to have several thousand employees. I hear different numbers on that, but there's going to be a lot of people looking for that type of housing in this immediate area. So I think housing is going to be a very strong market. We just got to make sure that however we approve it or do it, it generates financial benefits to the city and not just necessarily demand benefits that, you know, put too many kids in our school system or call for too many police or fire calls or whatever. So, you know, I commend the council for what your thoughtful discussion tonight. I think it's a soul-searching exercise, but at the end of the day, you're trying to find out what's the right course for Batavia to do. At the end of the day, history shows me that, you know, we go through these moments and something nice turns out to be the case. Thank you.
So, since we've all had an opportunity to express our concerns and thoughts and listen to what everybody else has had to say, and it is 10:30 in the evening, I would propose that we do one of two different things. I've got a couple options here that we could take action on, or we could continue the conversation to another meeting. The two items that I would suggest that we take action on, if we're going to, would be one, and we could rewrite this. I just wrote it down myself here thinking about it. One would be to authorize staff to perform this study on financial feasibility to proceed with the One Washington Place development as conceptually revised. That's just some verbiage I just wrote down. The other one would be to make a statement that the council is not willing to change from the original plan and or financing from the original, okay, so I wrote that wrong. State that the council is not willing to change from the original plan and or financing as approved through the RDA. So we could add or take away from that or not make any actions tonight at all. It's your pleasure. Mike?
I came in here tonight where I was against it. Nick and I have talked and we kind of agree on this, but I think the way things have went tonight, maybe we're too emotional right now. It's only been a week. Maybe we should put this off for another week and decide what the fate is on this at that time. I just think we have to sleep on it.
Okay, so there's one to put it off. Dan?
I appreciate the mayor's history lesson, and I'm willing to give this partner another chance. So I would make a motion that we send this back to staff to review and see if this is financially feasible.
Second.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second on the floor to authorize staff to proceed with the financial review of the 1 Washington Street plan as has been discussed and revised. I guess that's broad enough for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we better do a roll call.
Janzik?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Salvati?
No.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Callahan?
No.
Meitzler?
No.
Mueller? Malay?
Aye.
Ewer?
No.
Saron?
No.
McFadden?
Aye.
Brown?
No.
Rosato?
No.
Atack? Aye. Stark?
Aye.
What's that count?
7?
7 yes.
7.
That was a plot, there was a conspiracy. I saw you all sitting there.
Wait a minute, you're not from Geneva.
No. I vote aye.
Okay, going back, staff has got the authorization to proceed.
Thank you.
Okay, since
No,
we're done with that discussion,
Can I make one comment, Dave? I think after last night's and us deciding that we had to have all the information in front of us before we made our informed decision, I think we just did the right thing. Because if this comes back and says the numbers don't work, then it's a pretty easy decision for us to make as a council. So I think we just did the right thing.
I agree.
okay. Project status, do we have anything?
We don't have any.
Briefly? Good.
No.
Okay, anybody have any others?
Good.
You know, it's getting late.
Okay, I do have one real quick other.
Okay.
As much as we talk about taxes and revenue and everything else,
Yes.
I went to buy a bottle of water out here tonight. $2 for a bottle of water.
Used to be a
They're
dollar.
$1
Making all the
upstairs.
money on that.
They're $1 upstairs.
Dave, you need to read the front of it. It is for Special Olympics, I believe, is for the,
Is
for
the extra
police
dollar?
department.
Yeah.
I think that's where the money's, no, I think
Well,
that
they ought to
was
fill it up because there was no water.
Right,
to
I-
buy.
that's,
Motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
Third.
Motion approved.